Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the European Vegan Summit. We are right now going to be initiating a panel on the EU-Mercosur treaty, a treaty against justice. So we're going to discuss the various ways that this treaty might threaten various parts of our security, especially food security. I'd like to thank Green Rev Institute, who has been organizing the European Vegan Summit. This is the second day. You can still join us on the third day tomorrow, so keep it in your calendars. So we have a very exciting panel with some very distinguished guests with us today. So I will start with a short introduction of myself. My name is Miłka Stępień. I work at CE Bankwatch Network, and I primarily focus on energy transitions and on climate and environmental issues. So I also deal with policy, but on a slightly in a slightly different field. This is why it's a great pleasure to be able to join this panel as a moderator and talk with you about the enormous pressure that European citizens and local farmers face in the face of this treaty and against powerful global corporations. I think it's very similar also in the energy sector that us activists are up against huge odds, and that's why it's even more important to really have a space to discuss this. So we're going to talk a little bit about, justice and social justice, especially environmental protection, climate issues, food security. But I will let our wonderful panel go into more detail with this. So first of all, let's start with Carla Lettieri, who is a vegan advocate with a PhD in juridical sciences and sociology. She serves as the executive director of Animal Equality Brazil, leading efforts in animal rights and welfare. I introduced Carla, but I can see Małgorzata. So Carla, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you here all the way from Brazil. Next, we have Thomas Mananda Richardson, also PhD Director of Research at Bryant Research, a behavioral science and policy consultancy, and he exclusively serves the issue of animal advocacy movement and the alternative protein sector, but he'll go into more detail during his presentation. Specializes in farming, food security, and food system economics. Welcome, Thomas. And then we have Liz Cunha, who is a political campaigner at Greenpeace the Greenpeace European unit. She's been Greenpeace's trade policy expert since 2022 and was previously a policy advisor in the European Parliament, focusing on sustainable trade and supply chains. Welcome, Liz. Next, we have Daniel Perez Vega, who works on the Eurogroup for Animals Trade and Animal Welfare Project. He acts as a constructive partner to EU decision makers and offering WTO compatible solutions to issues related to trade and animal welfare. Welcome, Daniel. And finally, Małgorzata Szatkowska, who's the president of Compassion in World Farming Poland since 2015. She's been working there, and she's an expert in animal welfare, agriculture, and food security. She collaborates with business, public sector, and NGOs to promote responsible consumption and systemic change. So welcome, Małgorzata. And we'll start off with maybe sort of a more general introduction to the topic about what the biggest threats of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement are. I would maybe like first to focus on a couple of the main issues that I indicated in the introduction, short introduction. So let's focus maybe first on social justice and how you see this agreement impacting issues related to social justice. I'll start maybe with Liz.
Sure. Hi. Nice to see everyone here. You really have to, I think, when talking about social justice and this trade agreement, what I think first is, what even is this trade agreement? It is a trade agreement between the European Union countries and the four South American countries composing the Mercosur bloc: Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And what civil society in South America is really saying or highlighting as one of the issues of the agreement is that it is following a neo-colonial logic of exploitation. So it's really going to exploit and explore nature, animals, workers in South America, primarily for the benefit, the economic benefit of a few large corporations that are mostly in Europe. So it's really going to increase this exchange of goods between the two blocs on a basis that is considered to be neo-colonial and just continuing that kind of exploitation of our natural resources and of people around the globe, especially if you consider the global north and global south relations. So when it comes to social justice, this is really a trade agreement that is going to reinforce those structures of exchange that are based on exploitation of people and planet. That's one of the first things when I think about social justice in this agreement, but there's many other aspects. Maybe to just mention one other social justice element. I was just last week with some colleagues from Brazil, some indigenous leaders from the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples. They were in Europe, and we had some meetings with politicians in Europe around this EU-Mercosur trade agreement. And they were really highlighting how this agreement is going to lead to more pressure on their lands because the expansion of agriculture in South America that is going to be a result of this trade agreement, it is really putting more pressure and going more and more into their territories and also leading to more use of pesticides in the areas around their territories. And that's, of course, also impacting their health and their plants and their rivers. So it is impacting a lot the rights of indigenous peoples as well in South America. They're already feeling some of those impacts now because they know politicians in Brazil and in the other South American countries, they know that the trade agreement is coming. So they're already starting to adapt and expect this European market that will be opened up more for the South American agricultural products. So the impacts are already being felt now. But once the trade agreement is approved, if it is approved, they fear that it's going to lead to more threats to their livelihoods and their lives. So yeah, I'll maybe stop here for now.
Thank you, Liz. I know it's a very short sort of a possibility to go into a lot of very difficult topics in a very short time frame. So we will try to give a good overview from various perspectives. And I think your opening statements lead well into some of the environmental issues or environmental justice issues, especially those in South American countries. So I'll hand over to Carla now so that maybe she can add another perspective to this. Thank you.
Hi, Milka. Thank you very much for being here. I'm honored to be with such a excellent team, colleagues in this panel. I think Elise made a wonderful overview on the treaty, and I can complement adding, giving a spotlight on the impact of over animals in Mercosur countries. One immediate consequence of this deal, if approved, if it's ratified, what we think is going to happen will be the increase of exports, especially animal protein products. And when we are talking about the commerce between Mercosur countries and the European market, it's the products that are very interested to be exported to Europe is meat or animal protein products. And this is related mostly to beef from cows and chicken. Now, we can find other products as well, but this represents the majority of exports. And immediately we'll feel the increase of feedlots, which is a confinement system. Nowadays, cows are bred in pastures, what represents a demand, a pressure of a rainforest, what Liz already mentioned. And to overcome this situation and to continue increasing exports, government and companies are investing in feedlots. And this will affect very negatively the quality of life of animals. But also, it's possible to say that it's going to be harder to fight for improvements in animal protection standards in Mercosur countries, because we don't have minimal standards. When we compare European animal welfare standards to the standards present in Mercosur countries, we can see that there is a huge gap. And with the increase of exports, it's going to be even harder, because the farmers and the companies will be focused on increasing exports. But if the deal don't have, or at least mirror clauses that can balance the animal welfare standards with the standards in the Mercosur countries, we'll see the decrease of the standards we'll have here. But it will also affect the standards in Europe, because the increase of exports with minimal animal welfare standards will lead to a race for the bottom in Europe. So it's possible to say that European producers trying to be more competitive will force the decrease of the standards they already have. So it's going to be harder to fight for animal protection both in Europe and in Mercosur countries. So what we can say is that this deal is terrible for people in Mercosur countries. It's not going to add so much value to our societies, but it's even worse for animals. I think it's going to be terrible if the European countries don't commit themselves to keep the same standards from both sides. I think this is the major impact.
Thank you, Carla. I know this is also a topic that Małgorzata is focusing on in terms of animal welfare and standards of the sort. So maybe, Małgorzata, you can add something from the perspective of, do you agree that this will impact European standards of animal protection?
Of course. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. In terms of animal welfare, and to add something what Carla just mentioned, I think it will be the Mercosur agreement in the presented form would be a step back in terms of European animal welfare legislation, but it would also definitely increase the trade in Mercosur products, meaning low animal welfare products. So the combination of decreasing the levels of animal standards with trade going up, it doesn't sound like a good combination. So I absolutely I agree with Carla on that. But I also think we cannot think about the current EU legislation because the minimum standards were mentioned before. We cannot think about this legislation as a whole and as a final product that is what we are aiming for, especially having in mind that we are currently in this very unique process on the EU level of animal welfare legislation revision. So if the Mercosur agreement, as I already said, in its presented form, will come into force, it will definitely undermine the EU effects and the efforts, and I'm afraid it will freeze any further progress with animal welfare in our country, impacting both sides. So all the member states, but also having impact on South America. And if we think about some simple examples, in South America, there is no legislation that basically bans any kind of the, let's say, the most cruel confinement in terms of farming animals, such as, cages for lying hens or crates for mother pigs and so on. And on the other hand, in the EU, amongst 27 member states, we have already excluded some of these cruel methods of farming, of keeping animals. I think the lying hens directive and the example of battery cages is a very good example. And that the ban was implemented 12 or 13 years ago already, and it's been introduced back then. However, and as I said, there is some current discussion around member states in terms of the animal welfare revision. But also, I think worth mentioning is that there are already some European countries, some member states who stepped up and decided to do even more that these minimum standards presented, as I mentioned, over a decade ago. So some countries such as Austria, Luxembourg already banned all cages for lying hens. Some other countries are in this transition period. And I'm not speaking only about lying hens, but also this is the case for other species such as mother pigs. So I think that's one of the things that should be definitely mentioned. And on the other hand, we have South American countries when, as I said, no similar bans have been enforced. And as we know, there is no new legislation expected to be presented in terms of these. And these are definitely this type of provisions that are missing from the current document as of Mercosur agreement. Also, I think it sends the agreement in this form sends a very counterproductive signal to European farmers. And speaking from my experience, from my discussions and meetings that I had with Polish farmers, it sounds very demotivating for them to hear that we can possibly import an immense amount of animal products into European Union where similar animal standards are not met. There's also the issue of potential, audits on the ground, who would provide these, who would conduct these, and so on. I think there was also mentioned the mirror clauses, which in theory sounds good. However, I would point out that even within current EU legislation, within all the member states, all the 27 countries, there is a serious issue with implementing some of these, directives or basically some of these law. We can mention the example of tail locking, which was, well, in theory banned in the late 90s. Then it was repeated in several other documents. However, from EFSA documents, but also from data coming from specific member states, we know that this procedure is still is still there, still happens in several countries, and this is an issue. We have the transport regulation, which is also another problem, and we try in the EU to limit this transport and exports of live animals. So
Małgorzata,
I
if
think
I can.
there's a lot of issues that yes. So to sum it up, yeah, it will have a huge impact on farm animals. Another good one.
Yes, I think it's very interesting that you noted that things are never set in stone in the European Union. I mean, we're seeing a lot of backtracking also on very good legislation that was introduced in recent years as regards climate issues, and right now the possible removal of some of the restrictions in terms of biodiversity, for example, protection and environmental protection. So it's not set in stone. Even if you have good standards, there are always ways in which they can be bypassed, or they take ages to transpose into national levels. So maybe here I would like to ask Daniel as well, who also works on EU decision makers, to sort of supplement this shortly.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for bringing me here to speak about the EU-Mercosur agreement. This is a big priority for us, fighting the ratification of this agreement as it stands, because it's a very bad deal for animals, both here in Mercosur countries. I think I'm going to repeat a bit what previous speakers just said about the impacts on animal welfare. And I agree somehow with what Carla was saying, that this agreement will actually worsen the existing situation. Because the EU and Mercosur, they already trade a lot of animal products. In fact, most of the imported chicken and cow meat come from Brazil. And so far, and that was already said, most of the EU's animal welfare standards do not apply to imported products, except for those at the time of slaughter. Now, the trade agreement has something that is something rather good. I mean, perhaps the only good clause there. It is that it will condition the liberalization of eggs to compliance with EU standards, and that's really good. But the problem is that, as I said, we don't trade eggs with Mercosur countries. We trade with import chicken and cow meat. And if you look into who's producing and who's exporting those products to the EU, you will find that most of the time it's very few but big companies, because in trade usually there's always few operators. It's a very concentrated market that very often use intensive farming systems, like Carla was mentioning, like feedlots, for example. So the Mercosur FTA, by reducing tariffs for an additional amount of cow and chicken meat, it will increase the trade in these products. And this expected increased trade is a big threat for those animals in Mercosur countries. But also, let's not forget about wild animals, because their habitat will be in danger. The increased trade in cow and chicken meat, but also in soy and in leather, it will bring more deforestation, will fuel deforestation in those precious ecosystems. And finally, of course, I have to mention the big threat on animals in the EU, or the progress that this agreement will bring to progress in the EU, because at times where the EU is looking into improving its animal welfare legislation, of course, this will bring a very bad signal to producers, to decision makers. This is what we call in trade a chilling effect, basically. We will perhaps not rise to the bottom, I think, but we will perhaps just cool down any progress on EU legislation. So that's another big threat that I see here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And finally, I think linking all of this is food security. So how do you see the biggest threats for food security arising from the agreement? And I'll hand over to Richie.
Thanks, Milka. Yeah, so the food security risk that I want to shine a light on here is the risk to our farmers. It doesn't matter what country you're in, farmers are the backbone of our food security. And so earlier, Liz highlighted how it can be exploitative to Mercosur farmers and agricultural workers. And it's no secret that in Europe, farming is in crisis, particularly livestock farming. And the EU-Mercosur deal could make that even worse. So it's kind of pretty obvious why some of the speakers have said it. Cheap animal products from Mercosur countries will negatively impact European livestock farmers because it reduces their competitiveness. European livestock farmers are protesting in the streets about this. But it can also be unhealthy for the sector in the sense that it increases the European livestock sector's dependence on imported soy. So Argentina is set to reduce their export tariffs on soy meal to the EU under this deal. And specifically for factory farmed meat, soy meal is a key protein component. It's a big part of the cost. And so it's a food security risk in that it kind of increases the sector's dependence on that imported soy meal. But I want to kind of zoom back a bit because we're at the European Vegan Summit, and so if you're a vegan, you might be reading all this and thinking like, well, I don't really care about the livelihoods and well-being of EU livestock farmers. Aren't they the enemy? And I can kind of understand where you might be coming from there, but I think a lot of people in our movement are increasingly realizing that actually we need to be working with farmers, even livestock farmers, to build a better food system. It doesn't really solve anything if we let EU livestock farming die off and just replace it with even lower welfare Mercosur factory farming. As Carla highlighted, Mercosur products are raised to even lower welfare standards than in Europe. And we don't really gain anything if we trade like LDC for JBS, basically. But even if these arguments don't speak to you as an advocate, they do speak to policymakers. Policymakers do listen to these arguments. The public thinks these arguments are important, and especially the conservatives. And our movement largely fails to speak properly to conservatives and largely fails to reach them. So I think we should be taking these arguments seriously. And I think we should be using these arguments as tools in our box to fight this agreement, even if you're fighting it more for animals than you are for European livestock farmers. And lastly, something I hope to touch on a bit later is that cheaper meat from Mercosur will also really hurt the cost competitiveness of alternative proteins, and alternative proteins have a lot of good food security benefits.
Thank you very much, Richie. So after that introduction into various aspects of how dangerous the agreement can be for very many countries, we'll go a little bit into how you're working on these topics in your respective fields and advocacy activities. So maybe first we'll start with Liz, and if you can tell us a little bit about how what Greenpeace's main concerns are regarding, the environmental impact of the agreement. So you sort of started on this, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you see this and what are the greatest worries that you have regarding this agreement.
Yeah, sure. I would say Greenpeace has been working on this trade agreement since 2018 or 19. And over the years, we've commissioned many different analyses. We've worked with, legal experts, but also environmental scientists to really try to estimate what the impacts of this agreement are. Everyone's spoken about, it's going to increase trade of meat, which first of all makes no sense in 2025. Why are we signing a deal that is going to boost the consumption and production and trade of meat? But there's been many analyses looking into what that means for forests, in particular the Amazon rainforest, but not only. So there's estimates showing that the meat quotas in this trade agreement could lead to at least 5% increase in deforestation rates in the Mercosur countries. So going beyond the Amazon rainforest, also in the Cerrado savanna in Brazil, in the Pantanal wetlands, in the Chaco forest in Argentina and Paraguay. And if 5% sounds like not much, it is huge. If you think about, the amount of deforestation that takes place there these days. And if you think just looking at the Amazon rainforest as an example, we know that already around 17% of it have been deforested or degraded. And if we reach a point of 20%, 25% deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, the forest reaches its tipping point where it starts to slowly become kind of a savanna. So it's really under threat, existential threat of being and continuing this important rainforest that we all know and need. So increasing 5% of deforestation rates in those ecosystems right now, it's really, really dangerous. And just because of one trade agreement, which we can live without. And that's just one of the impacts, of course. We've been looking at the impact of forests, but if you think about the associated emissions that will go with this agreement because of the deforestation, but also because the other side of the coin is that the European Union will be able to export more cars, mostly based on combustion engines, and also more chemical products. And the associated emissions with the production and then use of those products is also leading to a situation where we will have an overall increase of greenhouse gas emissions because of this trade agreement. And we know that we don't have time to continue increasing our emissions. We need to go down. So again, why signing a new agreement that is going to take us in the opposite direction of where we need to go? So these are the kind of things that we've been looking at. We also looked into how the agreement is going to increase the amount of plastics that are traded, especially single-use plastics, which really pollute the environment. So there's a lot of very bad elements in this trade agreement.
And of course, transport across from one continent to another, which is one of the, well, transport costs are, of course, a huge source of global emissions as well. So yeah, there's a lot of elements to this, and thank you for giving us an overview. And then maybe, like looking at it from the perspective of NGOs, we would move to Małgorzata and the role that NGOs play in influencing public opinion and policy regarding such trade agreements. So we know a lot about the threats that we have right now. What is our role, and how can we actually impact this situation?
Thank you, Mika. This is such a great question. I think as a NGO representative and as part of the movement, there are two components I would mention as how NGOs can make influence to the public. The first thing would be education, but in terms of translating very difficult, complex issues/agreements, as in this case, to more universal, more common language. So, citizens can actually understand it. And there's a reason this deal has been in the making for 25 years, right? The longest negotiated agreement in the history of EU, most likely. So this is one of the things, and obviously we've been doing that with so many NGOs, not only in the country, in Poland, but also across Europe, but also globally, just combining forces and trying to, as I mentioned, translate people that you most likely with your money you will just support this kind of cruel methods of farming that you wouldn't support or aren't already supporting in Europe, but this will happen when the trade increases and if this agreement actually comes into law. A lot about EU consumption, but also there is the component of food security. I think it was already mentioned, but food security in terms of not only production, good quality products, but also in terms of consumption. So basically the issues such as right to food. So we were working a lot on that, and the reaction, the backlash that we got from our supporters, from the citizens, what I heard so many times, that people were basically unaware of this, because again, this is such a complex issue. Any kind of trade agreement is very difficult to understand. So that's one of the things. But I would also say the other component of how NGOs should work with public, but also politicians / governments. We have this very unique position to be, let's say, a middleman between governments and society, so we can take all the notes, remarks, and opinions from the society and bring these to the government. However, we are in no position to, as watchers, we are in no position to produce law. So it's a tricky situation. However, I think it comes with, responsibility and also opportunities for NGOs and how to connect with public. And I think even in the recent weeks and months, we've seen some of these very good examples actually on how public pressure can work and how NGOs combining the forces with public pressure can make changes. It can make governments do something, can introduce new laws. I'm thinking right now about the case of Slovenia from a couple of days ago, which introduced the proposition on ban on one of the types of cages, species specific again. So I think that's where we are, and that's what we've been doing in Poland, but also working globally with other organizations.
Yeah, I think the biggest strengths that the NGOs have is through our networks, because we are able to come together and really try to push for certain changes. But what kind of changes are we going to ask for? So, what practical measure would you, Daniel, for example, recommend to policymakers, especially as regards the ethical treatment of animals within these trade agreements?
Thank you. I think that's a very, very good question. And I think there are two ways where you can address the ethical concerns and animal welfare in trade agreements or in trade in general. The first one, of course, is use trade agreements, like, for example, the EU-Mercosur FTA. But in that case, will be to liberalize, so to reduce the tariffs or to open quotas for products that comply with certain standards, certain production standards. I mentioned earlier the Mercosur FTA has this for egg products, but we don't trade egg products. So that conditionality there is rather symbolic. So my recommendation would be to policymakers, basically on the Mercosur agreement, would be just to renegotiate the deal and to include animal welfare conditions for the products that matter, for cow, for chicken meat. And I also encourage you to reach out to your governments, to policymakers, to parliamentarians with the same recommendation. The second option, if you cannot do it on a trade agreement, because a trade agreement actually you need to negotiate that with partners, so it's rather difficult, will be to address that in legislation. And that's perhaps the most effective way. If you ensure by legislation that all products placed in your market comply with the same or equivalent standards. This is way more effective because you don't need to negotiate that with partners. It's a legislation. Of course, you need to ensure that there are certain conditions that comply with WTO. For example, that is for to ensure the protection of public morals in your country, because in the EU, we can prove that European citizens do not want to consume products that are produced with cruel methods of production. So if we can manage to prove that, that could be a WTO compatibility. And this seems to be the direction of travel now that we have with the revision of the animal welfare legislation. So that's rather a good indication. Of course, there are some red flags or indications that we have to give to policymakers. We have to ensure that you will have the same transition periods for the producers to the countries. You want to ensure that audits, controls are actually implemented, because that could be a big problem there. But I'm sure we have technologies, we have a way to monitor that, and yeah, and that's what I would like to say. Of course, finally, of course, the scope of the legislation must be very comprehensive. You need to actually address the issues at stake, because with former Mercosur countries, we're importing chicken meat and cow meat, as I said. But so far, the legislation for now is looking into cages. So we also will need to look into other indicators to ensure that the right welfare concerns are addressed.
Thank you, Daniel. So now for a slightly different aspect of this issue. Richie, I know that you work on alternative proteins, that this is your main focus. How would this impact or improve food security, and how would the alternative protein sector be affected by the EU-Mercosur deal?
Yeah, so for starters, food security is a bit of a confusing concept. We might see it in the news all the time, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what it means. So a quick explainer, I like to think of food security as having three kind of main pillars. So the first one is that countries usually want to be mostly self-sufficient in their food supply, not reliant on imports. The second pillar is that they want affordable nutrition. And then the third one is that they want a thriving farming sector, right? I think alternative proteins have the potential to beat animal proteins and especially factory farming on all of these. So the first one is self-sufficiency. Well, European countries understandably don't want their food security to be dependent on imports from other countries, but that's what we get with our current factory farming system. And many European countries produce most of their own pork and poultry, and that makes it seem like factory farming improves self-sufficiency. But there's just one problem with that, is that these industries are entirely dependent on importing soy animal feed, right? If you take away that soy animal feed, the industry is thrown into chaos. So it's misleading to say that we're self-sufficient. But on the other hand, alternative proteins require hugely fewer inputs. They can be made on far less land with far fewer resources, far less water. And countries that produce a lot of alternative proteins can meet their protein needs with fewer imports and much less environmental impact. So it boosts food security there. The next pillar is affordable nutrition. So alternative proteins are healthier than the animal products they replace. Don't believe the hype spread by the meat industry that these ultra-processed foods are just as bad or worse. They are healthier. Peer-reviewed studies have shown that. Though, of course, with alternative proteins, a key issue is cost and affordability. But also factory farming doesn't help here either, because almost everyone agrees that we eat too many animal products to be healthy. And so reducing the price of a food that we overconsume does nothing for food security, right? And lastly, we've kind of touched on earlier that our current ways of farming can be very bad for farmers. Factory farming is even worse. Like, it automates away farming jobs. That's kind of the point. Whereas on the other hand, alternative proteins can create thousands of jobs, future-proof jobs, and lots of them for farmers. In fact, the Green Alliance estimated that we could have 4,000 new farming jobs from alternative proteins in the UK alone. And lastly, alternative proteins, they bring protein diversification. So animal agriculture is very few crops fed through a bottleneck of very few animal species. And things like diseases like bird flu, African swine fever can be really devastating to such a fragile system. Whereas with alternative proteins, just look at all the alternative milks we have. We have soy milk, pea milk, oat milk, rice milk, coconut milk. I've had potato milk before. We can use a diverse range of proteins that suit a lot of farmers. So all proteins are great for food security. But unfortunately, I think the EU-Mercosur deal will be pretty disastrous for alternative proteins for a reason that's quite simple. We'll be importing cheaper meat, and so it will get very hard for alternative proteins to become cost competitive with animal products. They're already struggling, and we are making some progress, but this will set us back even further. And secondly, if we're importing more soy meal, that might allow European farmers, livestock farmers, particularly factory farmers, to drive down the cost of their meat products as well, which also make it harder to compete. Because ultimately, when it comes to factory farm chickens and pigs, most of the cost of the animal, most of the price to consumers is in the price of the feed. So there's a big danger that even though alternative proteins are not mentioned anywhere in the deal, that they will be very badly affected by this deal.
Okay, and finally, I mean, we've focused a lot on the situation more from the European perspective in the last couple of statements. So maybe let's go back to the South American perspective a bit more and the animal welfare situation there. Maybe you can add some more about how this will impact animal welfare in South America. Carla. Carla, unfortunately, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, the main impact is that it's going to be even harder to increase animal welfare standards because we don't have enough standards yet. We've been working in this opposition to the deal for almost 3 years or maybe more. And we've seen that with exception of Brazil that has some animal protection to farmed animal bred here, the other Mercosur countries are very insufficient, have insufficient laws and norms to protect farmed animals. So if we don't have enough, and this deal is going to increase the amount of exports to Europe, it's going to create a very a huge imbalance between animal protection movements and the capacity to protect animals and the companies. Now, you know that the companies working here, producing here, like JBS, Mafrig, and others, they are already very powerful, and they have tremendous power in the National Congress, so they can influence the laws, and they can curb our attempts to advance in animal protection. So very simple laws, for example, a law to ban forced feed, face tremendous resistance, and this impacts only 2,000 animals a year. You can imagine attempts to protect the lives of farmed animals. There are the main source of income of such huge companies. And in my opinion, what we have seen, we face it too difficult to work more efficiently in this opposition. First, the oppositors to this deal are not working so organized as they could be. For example, we've seen that two main topics were the source of opposition from European countries to the deal. The Mercosur countries wanted the deal, and we knew that France and other countries were resistant. And the core center of this opposition from these state members was that they were concerned to the impact on rainforests and environments, violation of human rights, but also with animal welfare standards, because they wanted to protect what the interests of the farmers that are working in a way that satisfies the expectations of the European citizens. But on the other hand, animal welfare was not at the core center of the broader opposition of the deals. We have been finding difficult in dialoguing with other movements. And we had so much to add because some very interesting and important topics were related to animal welfare. And the other challenge is also about the complexity of the topic that Margosata already mentioned. It's such a complex topic, and it's so difficult to explain to the general public the impact this deal is going to have on the environment, on animals, and in their lives. And so we have to make it simple, but on the other hand, it's still not so attractive to the Mercosur audience because they are facing all the problems, and we have to compete for the attention. So we still have a room for resistance because the ratification process hasn't started, but we have to work more organized. And we have also to find a way to engage the general audience, the society as a whole, because despite our efforts, it's so a part of the resistance.
What comes out a little bit from all this conversation is it's very hard to say who will benefit from the EU-Mercosur aside from big corporations, because it won't be us consumers, or if I don't like the term consumers, but the people who eat the food are not going to be, the producers in Europe will not be in a better situation. I doubt it will improve the situation for producers also in South America. It will not help the farmers. It will not help animals. So who is benefiting from the EU-Mercosur treaty? It's a very simple question, but who are we signing this deal for? Because it's very similar. It's right now we're talking a lot about competitiveness in the European policy. It's become sort of this new buzzword. And one of the main issues is that a lot of European producers are losing out and disappearing from the markets in various fields. And it seems very similar that this is what this treaty will lead to. So who is winning if we sign this agreement? And I would open the floor. I mean, who would like to answer this question?
I wasn't
Liz.
sure if it was a rhetorical question.
No,
One
I'm
answer.
I'm very curious to hear your take on it because, there should be two sides. I mean, someone should be benefiting from it, but I can't hear a single person benefiting from it. So who do you think is benefiting from it?
Yes, not a person, but the especially German car industry and the German chemical industry. They want to sell more cars and they want to sell more pesticides and plastics to South America or to anyone who will take them. They are really estimated to be one of the main beneficiaries of this trade agreement. So really the German car and chemical industry on the European side. On the South American side, we have commissioned studies to check how much JBS, which has been mentioned, the world's biggest meat company, how much they could benefit from the trade agreement. And really just this trade agreement alone could give them more than €1 billion in extra profits, extra net profits in the next years, just by signing this agreement. So yeah, they stand for sure to benefit.
Would anyone like to add anything to this quite short list? Richie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we also need to be real here that if this does reduce the price of meat for consumers, then some consumers will feel that it has benefited them. Like we shouldn't close our eyes and pretend that that isn't a benefit for some people. But it does mean that we have our work cut out for us in making the public aware that cheap food has a cost somewhere, right? There are costs that you don't pay at the supermarket must be paid somewhere else, right? So even if for some people may feel like it is beneficial for them, as we've seen here today, it's going to come with some other costs. And I think we need to make people aware of the deal that they're making, really.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of comes in additionally is health. Because if we have low quality food, Europe is considered to be one of the places where we have one of the highest standards in terms of food, and it's not that high anyway, as I'm sure we all know. This agreement is heading in the opposite direction. So maybe Daniel, if you'd like to add something on that, or in another format. But before I hand over, we do have space for a couple of questions. So if you want to ask a question, this would be a great time for you to put it in the Q&A section that you can find at the bottom of the screen. So please go ahead and put in your questions, and I will be sure to ask our panelists. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to add something about the fact, that indeed imports will make some food cheaper for consumers, and they could be beneficial for them in the sense that it will be cheaper. But also, there's something very important: is that the imported food or imported meat that is coming to Europe is often presented then in processed products or in products where consumers do not know the origin of the food. So, for example, if you ask consumers in Europe, are you willing to pay more for this kind of product that is produced with these methods of production? Very often they could say yes. But if you go to a supermarket, the product you're going to find is not from South America. You will never find in a supermarket, a piece of meat that will have the logo from South America or the brand. That product mostly is European, because in Europe I'm sorry, maybe you're more an expert on this, Thomas, than me, but the self-sufficiency is quite rather high, and most of the food that is in the meat is produced in Europe. But then all the other, that meat, that cheap meat, imported meat, goes to industries where consumers don't see that, and that use this kind of processed products. So that will be, I think, a big problem, because then you don't know that, and consumers don't know that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you make there, Daniel. So what I'm saying is that consumers may not realize some of the costs they're paying, but what you're describing is that some of these costs might be actively hidden from them, right? And I think that's another very important dimension to it.
Thank you, Richie. Małgorzata, if you'd like to add something, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mika. I wanted to add something about what Richie and Daniel already touched upon. But also I see this false narrative in Poland, and I think this is the role also of NGOs to highlight this and to debunk it. The narrative of importing cheap meat from South America as the solution to possible hunger due geopolitical hassle, war in the Ukraine, and so on and so on. And this is the type of narrative we should be making people aware not to fall into that. That's what we also do in Poland. That's what I also hear also in the Polish parliament from politicians. It's sometimes the statement is supposed to work as the solution for anything the NGOs say or the activists say, and then they just pull out the card, possible hunger and not enough meat and not enough animal products for Europe. So I think that's super important. Also, what Richie said about feeding the farm animals and the issue. I think what we should be doing is, underlying the fact that we should be feeding people first and not farm animals. This is very insufficient and very unsustainable food system production, actually, feeding farm animals and then having meat and other animal source products out of it. It should be the other way around.
Okay, so we have more of an idea of who is benefiting from this. We have an idea of who will be losing out on this. Who has the most influence? So we have local farmers, we have global corporations, lobbyists, we have citizens speaking up. Whose story is being heard, and who is going to win out? How do you see the situation at the moment? And maybe I'll ask this question to maybe Richie. I will start with you.
Yeah, so coming back to what I said, I think one group that has a lot of power here is the farmers, right? So firstly, because we've seen that the policymakers listen to them, they will often they'll often pass policies that they don't want to anger the farmers, and we've seen what can happen when the farmers protest. And so I kind of want to reiterate here that we should be looking as an animal movement, as the animal movement, we should be looking to make alliances with farmers, because here is, especially European ones, because this is an issue where we actually have a lot of common ground. And so I think that we can forge some good alliances. There are groups doing that. So, for example, I see Kim in the chat has highlighted Vegans Support the Farmers. There's and so I know them. They do great work. There are organizations in the EU as well. So there's the Farm Transition Network, and there are some others as well. So I think this is a good opportunity to boost our voice, and get some of our messages heard by making alliances with farmers. And I think there are even ways that we can ally with livestock farmers to get some of the outcomes we want to. I think there are some win-wins there. We don't look for those win-wins, but I think we should be.
Okay, thank you, Richie. So, yeah, I think, I mean, it's sort of like the conversation about miners in coal phase out, which I'm dealing with a little bit. That suddenly turns out that you have a lot of common ground, even when you weren't expecting to. And your methods differed, of course, of how you approach the issues. What do we do because we have these global corporations, we have these lobbyists that are on the other sort of spectrum, and they have a lot of impact. How do you see us sort of limiting the impact that they have? And I think I'll try and ask Liz, because Greenpeace does a lot as regards large corporations and lobbyists, and I know it's an uphill battle because I'm in a similar field. But how would you see this? What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, until the deal is ratified, we can all do something. The politicians across the European member states and in the European Parliament, they have to decide in the next few months whether they're going to vote yes or no. So I would say the first thing we can do is mobilize as many people as possible to write to your politicians and ask them to reject this trade agreement. There are some tools already online that you can use. I'll share one of our Stop EU-Mercosur coalition. But there's others as well that you can look for, and make sure that you send emails and letters and tweets and blue sky posts and Instagram posts, everything you can do towards your politicians, and ask all the people you know and who care about these issues to do the same. I would say, the next few months are really when politicians will have to decide. And if they're hearing from the citizens, their constituents, that they don't want this, maybe they'll reconsider their position.
I see also there's a question regarding political parties and the support that you can get within political parties. Is there anyone who has been sort of following this? Maybe Daniel? Do you have an overview within which political parties throughout Europe you can find sort of support for against the agreement?
So the Mercosur agreement actually tends to be a very also national. You have to look into a national context, to a national spectrum. In some member states, you will find weird alliances between the right and the left against the Mercosur agreement. For example, that's the case if you're in France, you will most likely find every political party will be against it. But then if not, you also have to look, of course, the Greens. They are always going to, I think, help us on this one. The left and those countries, those who are less a bit perhaps pro-business or pro-big corporation, because those are the big winners here. I forgot to mention also a big winner also the European dairy sector that will is likely to export a lot of dairy and pork to the EU. So there's also in that sense. So coming back to the political spectrum, I think you have to look into a very national context and see who will be there. So it really depends on your member state.
Yeah, I can imagine some very weird coalitions in these regards, because it does sound like there's a lot of variety in reasons why various groups can go against it. I wanted to ask also, but I see a hand up from Richie. So maybe I'll give you the floor, and then I'll jump over to Małgorzata, because I have a question that I want to ask her in relation. So let's go to Richie. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just to quickly build on Daniel's point, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact here that this agreement is hated by a lot of people on the right as well. People across the political spectrum are against this. And coming back again, I think the vegan movement, the animal advocacy movement, doesn't necessarily ally with farmers as much as it could. I also think the movement doesn't involve conservatives as much as it could. I'm willing to bet that most of the people on this call, including the audience, describe themselves as liberals. But there are plenty of conservatives who are interested in these kinds of animal welfare issues. They are allies again in this deal, and I think we should also be exploring those alliances too.
Yeah, I have to say that, I mean, I work on energy transformation, it's a very similar situation, in fact. Like with farmers, like the miners are definitely not our automatic sort of group that they're actually told a lot of negative things about environmental organizations, and they see us as the reason why certain things are being done, legislation is being passed. But in recent years, it's turned out that we do have points of agreement, and we can actually work together with each other on sometimes very surprising issues. So yeah, from my perspective, it can move things forward if you have a common point. Doesn't mean you have to agree on everything. So thank you for that, Richie. And then I'd like to ask Małgorzata, sort of moving on from this. So businesses and the public sector can sort of find ways of collaborating effectively to promote consumption, responsible consumption, and systemic change. And this is linked, I think, to some of the things that we should be working for instead of heading for this sort of disastrous Mercosur deal. How do you see this? Do you have like space for a, sort of an idea for this collaboration? I'm sorry, I lost the phrase.
Of course. Sorry, just to repeat, and so your question about the possible collaboration between NGOs and businesses, commercial companies, on how to start the Mercosur agreement, or
Well, how do we work on responsible consumption? Because this is one of the issues. Like we're talking about, increasing consumption, and through the Mercosur agreement, because it's actually aimed at that. Like, more and more production, bringing in more and more from other areas. Do you think that there is a way in which we can sort of change this?
To be honest, in terms of working with food businesses
way forward, the limitations of these approaches we've been discussing, and what else is needed in the coming years to succeed. And last but not least, we will give you, of course, as audience, the chance to ask questions. And please feel free to write any questions you have into the chat. And please also make sure to indicate if you want to pose that question to one person specifically or the whole panel. For our discussion, I have the great pleasure of welcoming, well, 3 distinguished panelists, but 4 were planned to be part of the panel. The first one would have been Vani Victoria Ashkanovna. Vani is an animal rights and environmental activist working toward a compassionate plant-based world. As European liaison for the Plant-Based Treaty based in France, she leads initiatives promoting plant-based policy solutions. Remarkably, the call for an international plant-based treaty as companion to the Paris Agreement is to date already endorsed by 46 cities worldwide, 244,000 individuals, 1,700 organizations, as well as 2,600 businesses. So I already saw that in the chat referring to the plant-based treaty. Please check it out, and please also get in touch with Vani personally. The second panelist, which I would like to introduce, is Olga Kiku. Olga is the director of the nonprofit and Animal Advocacy and Food Transition, based in Greece and also Brussels. She holds a PhD from the University of Massachusetts and has extensive experience in civil society, advocacy, and citizen participation. If you work in Brussels on food policies, as I do, there's no way, luckily, around Olga's policy making here. The third panelist, which I would like to introduce, is Charlotte Lindebank. Charlotte is co-founder and executive director of the Question Mark Foundation, a nonprofit think tank based in Amsterdam. Since 2012, she has led efforts to increase transparency in food production, aiming to create a healthier and more sustainable and also fairer food system. One example for this is Question Mark's famous Super List that benchmarks retailers on their environmental, social, and health performance, and has rolled out in more and more EU countries as we speak. And I think we'll be hearing more about this in your intervention. And the fourth and last panelist is Ignacio Uribe. Ignacio is the founder and CEO of Fundación VEG and runs the Vegan B Label in Latin America. She's also the author of the book How to Be Vegan Today, but then in Spanish, and the creator of the Todo Vegan app. Based in Santiago, Chile, joining us from far away, she enables citizens to make more sustainable choices, being convinced that anyone can consume more sustainably with the right information. Welcome to you all. When preparing for this panel, one experience came to my mind immediately, and that was March this year, because in March I had the honor to visit the exhibition Factory Farming, Unveiling the Hidden Costs in the European Parliament, co-organized by the European Institute for Animal Law and Policy, with great leadership of Olga at the time, and the European Environmental Bureau. With these ambitions still fresh in mind, I would like to ask all of my panel, what are for you the most shocking examples of hidden costs in our food system? And as we are unfortunately lacking one participant in our panel, you have a bit more time to elaborate that point, roughly 3 minutes. Olga, would you like to start?
Certainly, sorry, I had to unmute. Thank you very much for the introduction. Well, for me, the most shocking hidden costs of our food system, since we actually are at the European Vegan Summit, are the immense suffering of animals and also the wider so-called negative externalities that come with cheap products. So behind cheap animal products lies a very harsh reality for farmed animals, with their lives being reduced to mere production units. But also there's a lot of damage that has been done already to the environment, via deforestation, for example, and water pollution and biodiversity laws and all these externalities. And we shouldn't forget that there's a human side also. those workers, many of them migrants, a lot of them coming from a very lower, let's say, socioeconomic background, and facing low pay and having very, very limited protections in general. So these hidden costs, I think, if we look at the big picture of these costs, is basically what lies behind them is the embedded violence that we find in every stage of this system. So it is violence against animals, against the environment, and against people who are more vulnerable. So what shocks me the most is the fact that this is in a way normalized. Our society accepts this violence for the sake of affordability or convenience. And that acceptance, in a way, shapes our culture by teaching us to look away from suffering and destruction. And in condoning this violence, we reinforce and we perpetuate this system that we ought to be questioning first and rejecting, of course. So in a way, it makes it more difficult for us to imagine a better alternative, because we're so much into this system, which is basically has this embedded violence in it.
Thank you so much, Olga, for this starting point to our discussion. With that, I would like to pass it over to Ignacia.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for the introduction, and also thank you so much for the invitation to this panel. It's really an honor to be here, representing also the Latin American voices here. I'll say that for me, the most shocking hidden costs are two. One is how many animals die every year because they are food waste. I mean, we raise animals, like around 18 billion animals. I don't know if you have seen the news. And just to kill them and put it on the trash. So I think that's like a very important point, because if we don't tackle food waste as a movement, I think we are missing such a big opportunity. And the second one, at least for me, because it's something very personal and it's more local, is the fires in the Amazonia. I know some years ago they did a lot of buzz in the news, but that happens every year. It's not just once in a while. The one time that you saw probably in the news in Europe was because they were out of control. But every year we have fires in the Amazon. Many of them are even legal and authorized by the Brazilian government or other governments, just because we need space to grow soy to feed animals that then later on are going to travel around the world and being consumed for other places in the world. So here in Latam, we raise not just the animals that other countries use for food, but at the same time, we suffer the deforestation and the fires because of that.
Thank you so much for that, and also bringing in the global justice perspective. Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Maximilian. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. And well, it's not the most, it's not a question that makes you happy and listening to all these stories. But I'll just add one personal note to it, because I think lots of what has been mentioned is, well, are indeed the hidden costs of our food system. So, of course, for me as well, what really drives me are as well also the billions of animals that live in factory farms and are enduring lives of suffering, and the rainforests being cut for soy and eventually for cheap meat to be produced, cheap meat and dairy. But also the desertification. So rivers are being drained, valleys left dry, so that we can eat beef but also almonds, avocados, other types of food that contribute to that. And also the trend, the use of fertilizers and pesticides that are polluting our ecosystem, creating lifeless dead zones and making insects disappear and even making people sick. But for me personally, the most shocking thing when I thought about all of this is the double standard that we live in here, especially in Western countries, because in our own countries, we would never allow our pets to be treated like the way animals are treated in factory farms. We would never allow for the forests here in Western Europe to burn, or let alone to be cut down for agricultural as they are in the Amazon. We don't allow our babies to eat food that's treated with pesticides, etc. But we do allow it when it's for grown-ups, which is a strange contradiction. So we don't really trust it, but I think, well, so most of these harms that are caused by the food system happen far from home, or in a place where we don't see it, at least. And we look away from it, and we, at the same time, continue to benefit from the fact that the food prices that we pay are actually too low. And this is something that actually, it bothers me every day. And so, yeah, that's one of my personal frustrations that I feel every day when I'm doing groceries for myself. I think, why are we paying these low prices and not paying a normal price? And yeah, that's what drives me in my work as well.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, and everyone else. I can very much, refer to that feeling of reflection, but of also a bit kind of a hopeless feeling sometimes. And it's all the more inspiring to have all of you together today, because while, of course, we have so many hidden costs, while we have these double standards, while we have such great injustice regarding the relationship between the global north and the global south, the question is, of course, how do we actually get better? How do we become better? And how do we act better? As citizens, as companies, as policymakers, as society and economy. And essentially, how do we convince, guide, or consult those can drive sustainable change right now? And as we will see, our panelists will bring different perspectives and approaches to the table that also tackle different levers of change, where to start. And with that, I would like to turn to Ignacia. I did my preparation, of course, for the panel, and I read one article that was written about you that basically, also reflected your conviction that everyone can have a healthy and more sustainable lifestyle once the right information has been provided. And also thinking about myself going to the supermarket every single day, the question is, what role do I personally, but also what do consumers in general, what role do they play in pushing back these hidden costs that we've been exposing?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question, Max. I think it's very interesting to question ourselves as consumers. I'm a journalist, so I truly believe in communication and information, and I think that's one of the main points that we should focus on. Like, people with the right information can take the right decisions. But I think we at Veg Foundation, we work with consumers. We have some campaigns, as for example, the challenges, like we have the veggie challenge, we have the no milk week, the no fish week as well. So we truly believe that there is a big opportunity in individuals, even if we also work a lot with corporations and do corporate work. But I think when we focus on people, we shouldn't just see them as consumers. We are also citizens, and sometimes the whole responsibility cannot be tackled to the people as consumers. But I think the whole responsibility as citizens should be we should be responsible of our decisions and the politicians we elect. Every 5 years, depending on the country. So we also try to focus a lot on that, to see, okay, the consumers' decisions are linked to the political decisions. Like food is something very political, especially here in Latin America. So I think, yeah, there is this big opportunity in consumers, but we need to give them the right information. So, for example, as I see it, we have been working with the V-Label for 5-6 years, and we did an Ipsos survey this year, and 93% of Chilean people, they are not vegan, of course, agrees that it's very useful, for example, to make decisions when they are going to buy something. So if we have more labels maybe like that, we can help people to make the right choices. So I think we should also develop something that shows people this type of hidden cost in food products. Even could be like a true cost label, for example, that maybe tells you where the products come from, how much water did it use, how much kilometers did it has to go until it was sold in that place. I don't know, it's not maybe my specialty, but I think, yeah, we could think about something like that to give consumers more information about what they are buying, because every time I was going to say they, but it's also we. Every time we buy something, every dollar we spend is like a vote of trust we are giving one company over another one. So we have to try to give it to the company that is doing the things right, because yeah, we live in a system, so it's impossible not to participate on it. And one of the ways to participate, of course, is voting every so many years in elections, but at the same time voting every day that you buy something.
Yeah, I can refer to that, making that vote in the supermarket, kind of struggling between different products, different prices, different brands. And yeah, what I often lack is, as you say, transparency and also the knowledge. And I think, yeah, going to the supermarket, you do not have so much time to, make all the choices and read all the packaging. So then the question is how do we actually make it easier for consumers, which are citizens at the same time? And in my introduction, I mentioned 2 examples where I know that you've been working on. The first one is the vegan label in Latin America. And the second one is this newly developed Todo Vegan application on our phones that I actually downloaded and checked it out. And my Spanish is very, very bad, but I think I understood the approach. So I would like to hear from you what your thinking was behind to really, go into certification and also go into, getting into people's telephones. And what are your experiences with that?
Great, awesome. Thank you so much for downloading it. You can download it anywhere in the world, so for people that is here. But I don't know why you didn't get the English version. It's supposed to be in English if your phone is not in Spanish. So maybe you can look at it. I don't know, but it's supposed to be like for every phone that is not in Spanish should be downloaded in English. Yeah, the app is something very new. We just developed this year. It was an idea that we had for so many years, but this year, because of kind of the same, we're in a very special political moment in Chile, and I think in all around the world, where the extreme right is probably going to win the next elections. And we have never had an extreme right government since we came back to democracy. And it was like so many years ago. I was like 5 years old. That is kind of scary. And I also think it's maybe, or part of it is because we as organizations focus too much on corporations and institutions, because it's easy to have, when you make a change there, and I know it because we work with them, okay, you can, I don't know, like change 1,000 plates, like it's one person taking the decision and you go and change 1,000 plates. The difference with people is that you have to go one by one, and of course it's slower. But many organizations doing that, I think we didn't work that much with people. So there was like a cultural change that we didn't see coming. And now we have to focus on this cultural change for the animals again. So that's one of the reasons that we're with these new projects as the mobile app, and trying to give consumers and people and citizens that are all the same all the tools that they need to make the right decisions. Because right now, when you go to the supermarket, or like probably a more normal person going, I don't know, a vegan one, but maybe a normal person going to the supermarket, their choices are because of prices normally. So you see two products that looks like the same, and they say, oh, okay, this is the cheapest one. I'll have this one. Which I always find it very like strange or weird for me, because food is like the fuel you're giving to your body, and like people choose the expensive one for the cars here at least, and then they choose the cheapest one for them. So yes, I think we should give more information to consumer so they can make the right choices. We also have here in Chile, we have a project that then spread all Latin America, that are labels from the government that says high in sugar, high in calories, high in fat. I don't think they are the best labels, because something like I don't know, because it's just like in a mathematical formula. So for example, I don't know, like peanut butter can be labeled as high in calories, even if they are good calories. It has their own problems, but it's a thing that has been being copied by other countries here in Latin America. And I think it also empowers people to make choices and to read the packages and to be more aware of what are they consuming. So yeah, like regarding the question about our experience with the app and with the certification, I will say that when you give people these kind of tools, you always see there is like how to say it, there is something changing, even if you don't see change very quick, as you can see it maybe in a corporation or an institution or a company, but it's something changing in the cultural landscape, and I think that's very important too, and we shouldn't forget about that, because I feel that we forgot about it for so many years that now we are in this kind of cultural problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think a lot to think about. Something that I really noted down from your intervention was that every dollar is a vote of trust. And then, of course, this responsibility as a consumer to really make a change, also in a changing political environment. We will keep that in our minds while we shift to our second panelist, Charlotte. Foodwise, as you know, at least our EU team is based in the Netherlands, and that's why I also know the influence of the Question Mark Foundation and the influence that you have gained for driving change in the retail sector, and also the unique position that you have chosen to engage with these companies and facilitate that change. My question to you, Charlotte, therefore is, how can supply chain transparency empower consumers to make more informed choices, or do you actually disagree with this notion? And what tools do you use in your work to really bring change to the shelves of supermarkets?
Yes, thank you, Maximilian, and also Ignacia, thank you. I would really like to in my answer respond also to the plea that Ignacia is holding for bringing more information to consumers and citizens, and everybody is equal in that respect. I agree. I think it's an important thing to do, and I don't want to plea for stop doing that, for stopping to bring more information to people, to citizens, and to stimulate cultural change. I think that's a very important thing that we need to keep on doing. But at the same time, I think it's a dangerous thing to keep on repeating that it's citizens or consumers or people, individuals, that hold the responsibility and that are voting with every dollar that they spend and holding a responsibility for what they buy, because of several reasons. First of all, I think with the information that you can give people, even if they want to make better choices, you don't always have time, money, or headspace to use the information once you have it to buy better products and to scrutinize labels on food products, etc. And even if you and even worse, I think the food environment that people are buying products in currently is shaped in such a way that we are constantly being tempted and geared and nudged in directions that we don't want to go, and that even having the right information is not enough to resist the temptation that is being brought to you from the marketing, from retailers and A-brands. Well, having said that, I don't think that consumers should be carrying the burden of choosing between sustainable and unsustainable, but that retailers and A-brands and governments who are facilitating these companies should carry this responsibility and should be held responsible, and that we should really be wary of talking too much about citizens' responsibility, because it shifts away the blame, and it helps companies to escape from the responsibility that they are holding to use the power that they have to help their customers making better choices. And this power is very asymmetrical. As I said, the marketing power of A-brands and customers is, well, as you probably know, being executed through the products they sell in their assortments, the pricing of products, the promotions that they do for products, and the placements, so the design of shops, are all geared to influence consumers, the customers of these companies, to buy certain products. And at this point, it's not healthy and sustainable products. So it's gearing people towards unhealthy, unsustainable products. And We know also from research, unfortunately, that giving more information to people is not going to help them to resist these temptations. Well, having said that, I don't want to say that it's good to keep on educating people and very important to keep on developing cultures everywhere. But at the same time, I personally think that we should put more exposure, that we should create more exposure to the power of retailers and A brands. And so this is also what we do at Crashmark, indeed, as Maximilian already mentioned. We research how retailers apply these marketing tools, so their products, pricing, promotions, and store designs, and what impact they have with these marketing tools. And based on the evidence that we create through our research, we advise these companies to adjust their conduct, and we advise governments to develop regulation where these companies need level playing field because they can't take some measures individually. And just a small correction, we don't really collaborate with these companies. So these benchmarks and the research that we do is unsolicited. They don't ask for it. They don't even need to participate. We do it independently, and we publish independently. With the aim for disclosing the conduct of these companies and the impact and influence they have, and to create awareness around this influence, and also to create the knowledge within these companies to take steps to make progress and to create a race to the top. So we really try to get into their competition and help them gear their competition, which is now geared at lower prices, and to gear this competition towards becoming more healthy and sustainable. And our flagship program with which we are quite known for now is called Superlist, and we've done this benchmarking and advocacy program in the Netherlands and Germany, Belgium, and are currently doing it in the UK, Switzerland, Sweden, Poland, French, and Spain. So beginning of next year, a benchmark comparing the retailers of all these 8 countries will come out, and we'll be working together with civil society organizations in all these 8 countries to help create one language of definitions and indicators and topics that we need to talk about and that we need to expose retailers on, and that civil society should all be using in their campaigns and in both towards citizens and developing this culture and of being aware of what do we see in terms of products and pricing and promotion, but also to lobby towards governments and also to put pressure on retailers to start moving. And our experience so far with this program is that for a long time the role of retailers was really overlooked. We were paying a lot of attention to the role of consumers and citizens and governments and in some cases A brands, but not so much retailers. And finally now in the last couple of years, the impact of retailers has begun to be exposed. But so far, mostly only in Western Europe, I think this trend is happening. But we do see that this type of exposure works because it enables scrutiny, which in turn sparks this race to the top. At least among the leading retailers, we see this happening in the countries such as Germany, the Netherlands, UK. We see the leading retailers really starting to report and setting targets on, for instance, climate and also the protein shift, rebalancing animal versus plant-based products in their sales. And my hope and belief is that if we continue this process, that the front runners will be followed by the rest of the market. And what is necessary and what I hope that will happen in the next couple of years is that we will be able to roll out this program also in Eastern and Southern and Northern European countries, where we unfortunately see hardly any movement yet from retailers.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for this very great insight into the work that you've been doing for now 12 years. And I think for at least one part of the retailer assortment, we can say that it's no longer a niche to talk about them and to scrutinize them and to keep them and push them. And I think a great sign for this is, of course, also our panel today actually discussing that and discussing together what the best mix of different options and different levels is that we need to tackle. As it has become clear, of course, it's not only about achieving change in our food system, but it's the way that we achieve it. And that's, focuses for me on 2 points. And the first one is, of course, who we are targeting, who we find powerful, who needs to be moved and convinced to make that change happen. But the second aspect is, of course, in getting there, who do we need to involve? Which stakeholders, which groups, which coalitions need to be involved to actually ensure that we do not only have change, but we have the change that we desire. So turning to Olga, I know, of course, your extensive experience at national level, at European level, engaging with so many policymakers and scrutinizing them on a daily basis. My question, therefore, is how do we actually increase the inclusivity and equity in these decision-making processes? And how do we transform our food system in a way that people feel heard and feel that their voices are being actually included in these processes?
Yes, thank you, Maximilian. I'm afraid it's not an easy answer. It's this is what we have been striving for many years. When we talk about inclusivity, we actually mean participation. We mean that people need to be able to be in a position to participate in these processes where decisions are made about their future and about the way their life moves on. So it's in a way, it's ensuring that citizens will have a seat at the table, that their belief system is actually reflected in the discussions and the conversations that take place up high at the highest political levels. The truth is that while, I mean, we have seen in Brussels, if anybody who works in Brussels can see that on a daily basis. So while citizens may get a seat at the table, their seat in a way is lower than others, than the seats of others. We need to ensure that citizens will be in a position to be heard and to shape the policies that affect their lives. So far, they don't necessarily get equal treatment, and we know in this decision-making process, and we know the roles of the role of big lobbies and the role of vested interests and all those representing vested interests and what kind of access they have. The European Commission recently opened a call for evidence on a civil society strategy, which actually just ended just a few days ago. And I read, This call for evidence will provide, on the civil society strategy, will provide a comprehensive framework for action at EU and member state level. It will focus on strengthening meaningful engagement. So this strategy will actually hopefully bring citizens to the forefront and provide support to all civil society actors, including specific actions to address the shrinking civic space for civil society organizations in promoting and protecting EU values, and will identify the needs and challenges faced by civil society actors and map measures currently in place that aim to engage in dialogue with and protect them, all the while recognizing their important contribution across all EU policy areas. Well, this all sounds good, but the question is, as a strategy, and what we've seen over the last few years, and the backlash in general in regards to legislative revision processes, etc., the question is, will it actually deliver any real outcomes, or will this be more rhetoric? And I'm afraid with no concrete commitments, this particular strategy also risks being an empty shell, because the reality is clear. Many citizens are rarely heard, and we also see those people for more marginalized groups are even less heard. They are often treated as passive recipients of policy, not in a position to shape policies themselves, shape the policies that affect their lives. So the key to better policies, I think, lies in strengthening the civil society role, and citizens. We should see citizens not only as consumers, but they are also voters, they are activists, and these people need to be empowered. So that means investing in education and making sure that they also realize how they can be involved further. And along with citizens, we need to empower civil society organizations, these NGOs and other grassroots movements, so that they are also in a position to basically to carry more weight. I mean, to have so that their voices carry more weight. So we have, yes, I mean, we do have certain tools, and a well-known one these days is the European Citizens Initiative. This particular tool that, and we have public consultations and dialogues and other things. But in regards to the ECI, for example, one would wish that it would be able to deliver more, especially those that actually fulfill the requirements and surpass the 1 million signatures, et cetera, et cetera. However, it's not so easy. And we have seen that out of over 120 that have been registered since this tool actually came into force over a decade ago, there have been very few that actually surpassed, were called successful in surpassing the minimum threshold of signatures. But and we have seen what has happened with the KJ GCI, which we still wait for this to actually materialize, for the Commission's commitment to actually come into play here. So in a way, we need to have tools, and we need to ensure that these tools that we have as citizens lead to real consequences, and they have real impact in our lives. I also want to say that when we talk about inclusivity, it's not just about participation and having access to, let's say, the big room where things are discussed. it's also about equity. It also means that civil society should have equal space and to be creators of policy, not just to be there and so that the other side, let's say, can tick the box and can say that, well, we've consulted with civil society too. Our voices don't carry the same weight. We know this very well. There are other economic interests and many other interests, big industry, etc., and their voices carry a lot more weight than ours. So we need to find ways, for example, via funding, providing funding for civil society organizations and grassroots groups, etc., and also making sure that their experiences are also heard. So it's not just those so-called scientific bodies that, in a way, are being heard, but also the concerns and the values of citizens that also come into play. And hopefully then we will see change, and we will see that the beliefs and the values of citizens and their expectations actually are reflected in the policies that are presented to us by the EU institutions, but also national institutions.
Thank you so much, Olga. I'm being mindful of time, but I have just a very tiny question, because I know that you're leading an effort for a new European action plan for plant-based foods. And of course, if we want to really have a shift, towards a more sustainable food system, this is such a key driver. So I wonder, what are your experiences when it comes to in integrating these voices that you've been mentioning, these powerful voices, into the European policy making, also in the current rather difficult political environment? What is, maybe in a very brief answer, from like the last few months of your efforts, what are first experiences that you can share?
Well, we saw a window of opportunity with I'm now going more into policy, but we saw a window of opportunity with the Danish presidency that started in July, and it was a presidency that actually very much supports this. They have put a Danish action plan for plant-based foods in place in the country. And now they are quite strong proponents of an EU action plan. So in a way, we're quite encouraged by this. And what we will try to do as a group of diverse actors coming from the food space, but also animal welfare, environment, and others, we will try to find such entry points during this term to make sure that what Denmark presented will be carried over to the next presidencies, but also will be embraced by the Parliament and the Commission. And I say this, and it sounds like, oh, it's an easy thing. Okay, would you just present this? It's not at all easy. We have a very strong backlash the last few years. We have seen that in the EU institutions, all the three big ones, the countries, the Commission, and the European Parliament. However, there are opportunities that we need to make sure that we capitalize on, and it's starting to feel that we can see some positive signs. Which is very encouraging, of course. And, hopefully we need all the strength and we need to unite together to make sure that we continue this into the new year.
Thank you so much, Olga. Very insightful. And I think we're all looking forward to seeing what comes out of it in the next few months. And thank you all to all of our panelists for sharing all these insights and learnings with us. I think it's sometimes, yeah, to be honest, refreshing to not only focus on the problem, but also see what is already happening and what impact has been created on an organizational basis, how long you are already in this fight and how much you've already achieved and what base there is for the next years ahead of us. So this is why also in the third part of our panel for the roughly coming 10 minutes, I would really like to pose one question to all of you, or it's rather a mix of a few questions, so you can choose a bit. But I wondered if we all take a step back, if you personally take a step back, where do you see us in 5 years? How far do you get with your diverse approaches at different political levels, with like different ideas behind your approaches? And what is maybe also the missing puzzle that still needs to be tackled? So in other words, what new alliances or maybe what new tools are actually needed to, get to the point where we want to be in 5 years? And I would like to start with you, Ignacia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, I think I am kind of an optimist, and I hope in 5 years we should be discussing other type of things, and and that this issue is more or less solved. Of course, not completely, but at least some part of them. I hope that we can see change in all levels, political, with more bills being approved to have better conditions for animals, but at the same time to boost alternative proteins and different kind of products that should be on shelves to make retailers also accountable for what they are selling and giving more choices to people. I also hope that we have more commitments from the companies and institutions and retailers going more plant-based, at least, if not 50%, at least, I don't know, like 25, 30% plant-based. We now are working with some commitments of 50%, and it has been working well with some institutions in the government, but at the same time, it's harder for the private companies. And in the consumer side, I hope we have, because we saw like very grow in the sales of plant-based products around 2020 and 2022, but I think now it's more like stabilized, and I hope we can find new products that are making those sales grow again. Yes, and in the other part of your question about like what we need to see all these, I think we need to work together, of course, as organizations, and see that we are in a global system where like your food could come from other side of the world. So we should try to work more together to find solutions and not just like local solutions like we're doing right now. I feel more global solutions because the system is global. So yes, exactly. Yeah. For example, we have been collaborating with, we did it like 2 years ago with a Eurogroup for Animals when they did the Chile and Europe did like a sales agreement. So we try farmers in Chile to have the same rules as you have in Europe, because farmers here are exporting the products to Europe. And even it's not fair for farmers in Europe, like they have to follow other type of rules. But yes, like we couldn't accomplish that because farmers here really oppose to have the same rules. So even if we don't have the same laws, we could work together to try to get those kind of agreements between countries or between regions, to have kind of the same, the same for everyone.
Thank you a lot. Charlotte, over to you. How do we ensure that the shelves of retailers are actually changing? What is missing?
Yes. Well, I think there's kind of two different worlds where I would be looking at. At the one side, you have the trends that you see now here in the northern Western countries, where retailers have really starting to disclose, to report on their on climate and protein shift efforts, and to set targets. But the challenge there is that those targets and don't stay paper promises, but are really turned into action. And that at this moment we see many promises of, but no results yet. So we really have to stay sharp there and think of ways how we can make them stick to their promises. And I'm also positive here, just as Ignacia. I'm hopeful that we've just in the very recent years see retailers set targets to help rebalance diets towards becoming more plant-rich. So now we just have to help them with testing methods and measures that they can take in their marketing mix of products and promotions and pricing and placement, to really realize the targets that they set. So that's the thing I think we have to do in Western countries, or in the European Northwestern countries, and in the countries where we don't see any even awareness yet amongst retailers of having a responsibility at all in climate, in climate, most of the retailers have already acknowledged the responsibility, but not yet. They have not yet acknowledged that the protein shift should be an essential element of a strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And to do that, I think in those countries, it is important to really work on building a strong civil society, to try to influence the culture and to mobilize citizens for that, so that in order for this to be able to eventually influence the public opinion and politics, because the retailers, even if the retailers themselves become aware, and if they would even like to take a step towards, for instance, disclosing on the balance of animal versus plant-based products in their sales, and if they would like to set a target, they need to feel comfortable in society to do so and not to get backlash that will hurt their profit. So what we know from some retailers for instance, in France and Spain, and in Scandinavia, they are aware inside the company, they are very much aware that working on a protein shift in their sales should be part of their climate strategy, but they just don't dare to make a step publicly, because they fear the backlash that they will get in society, in the public opinion, from consumers and from farmers, especially. So in those countries, I think we really need to work on developing a climate, a cultural and an atmosphere in the public opinion that will make retailers feel safe to publicly taking steps.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Still a lot to do, but I would like to give it over to Olga for your thoughts on this.
Okay, well, I think looking at the future. First of all, I think before we start looking at the future, we need to also look at where we are today. I don't know if perhaps previous speakers mentioned the speech by the State of the Union speech that Commission President actually delivered earlier today. She didn't really say much at all about food, but she did mention that they intend to boost the promotion budget and launch a new Buy European Food campaign. Now, by this, what kind of food are we talking about? I think we can all guess, and I think it's not necessarily the kind of food that we expect to have. So this is in a way, our starting point. So we have to make strides for the future. Earlier in May, and looking at this from the civil society perspective, it's not easy at all. Earlier in May, we had over 600 NGOs which issued a statement that civil society is under attack by members of the parliament. And more recently, the Commission announced also funding cuts to NGOs. So we have a lot of work to do for the years ahead. We need to create a greater awareness of the hidden costs of our food system. And we need to also realize that there has been progress. I mean, if you look back at what was going on maybe 10 years ago, certainly it gives us a reason for hope. But it's also progress is too slow, and it's blocked by all those vested interests and all those people, the representatives of the big, powerful lobbies. Therefore, I hope that we, in 5 years' time or even less, we will have moved to actually see concrete measures that would be enforced and that would reduce all these harmful practices and the suffering caused, and will reward more sustainable practices. And in doing so, we are putting in place diverse approaches, and we are united with many other organizations, providing basically trying to put in place the science, have scientific evidence, lobbying efforts, and also other campaigns, citizen campaigns. They have all made so far important contributions, but they're not enough. We need to join forces with even a bigger crowd. Just to mention that maybe I should put my pitch there. There is a new European Citizens Initiative, Good Food for All. Again, looking at the food system, calling for a reform of the existing system, trying to bring everybody together, bring small farmers, bring environmentalists and animal advocacy people and health people and lots of others, to try to push the Commission in the right direction. Just to close this, I think in general, I would say in regards to citizens, we need to try to educate and inform them, as many citizens as possible, to encourage participation and to join with others and form alliances in order to develop strategies that will eventually result in the policies that we want to see happening. It's not easy, but I think it's very doable, and we just need to believe in it.
Thank you so much, Olga, for your pledge. But also thank you to all of you for also your positive attitude and your energy in all of this. It's really inspiring. Being mindful of the time, I would like to turn our attention towards our distinguished audience. I have identified 3 really excellent and pointed questions, which I would like to point to you individually. And I would ask you to really answer briefly in about 2 minutes so that we can really make it through these 3 questions. The first one that I wanted to bring up is one on the harmful subsidies and the hidden cost related to subsidies for the meat industry. And of course, this, is a big topic, and I would especially look at Ignacia, bringing in the Latin American experience with all the consequences that you see there already now.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Actually, I think there are so many hidden costs that we cannot tackle in this conversation because there are too many. And that's one of them. To synthesize, we have been also working on that here, and we discovered that there are a lot of subsidies even here in Latin America to the products here, of course. And when we approach the government saying, how are you giving subsidies to these kind of companies that at the same time that you are working, for example, for climate change, it doesn't make any sense. The responses that we usually get back is that there are no projects a part of them, that they open this and the application process could be for any type of food, for example, but the meat industry usually takes them all. So I think it's also important to try to help more startups and new companies about alternative proteins to get to that funding, because usually those grants or fundings are not special, at least here, for animal products. They are, for example, for, I don't know, like food products in general. And then it comes the meat industry and take them because no one else is taking them. So we have to try to help other type of companies to apply to this kind of funding and get them. That's why, I think that's one of the strategies that we can follow about that.
Thank you so much, Ignacia. The second question, which I identified, I wanted to pose to you, Charlotte, because the question is, can we treat all externalities in the way that greenhouse gases are treated or analyzed? And there, of course, I'm also looking at your methodology and about shedding light on different perspectives in your super list and in your approach.
Well, my short answer would be no. I'm thinking there are some externalities that indeed can be measured very well, and that you can develop really concrete indicators on to hold supermarkets, retailers, and producers responsible for their actions in their scope of influence. But for instance, on in the domain of human rights, that's a very, very complex domain to measure the impact, and to develop indicators where you want to hold retailers responsible on. So far, it's just really merely policies that we are looking at with retailers, that they have in place to protect human rights, human and labor rights in supply chains. but to really measure the impact and to really measure the effect of their policies, that's extremely difficult because there are so many supply chains and the effects are so far away, and it's so diverse. The effects of their policies are so diverse. You want to look at the effects on of course, on farmers, smallholders, but also labor and children. And well, if you look at labor in a supply chain, you want to look at their circumstances, but whether they are able to organize themselves, whether they're able to file complaints, whether they're getting a living wage. And actually, then that living wage now is something that we think, well, that's maybe the best indicator to look at, but then you're ignoring a lot of other things. So, yeah, long answer short, it's not. There's still a challenge here.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And the last question is directed to you, Olga. The question is how we can include the medical industry and maybe also exchange it to extend it to the medical organizations part in this journey. Because it's pivotal in introducing healthier diet alternatives, which then help individuals who are ill to change their food choices in order to save their lives. So how do we bring these different perspectives and together and broaden our coalition?
Well, we are very much, I mean, that was one of the points we realized early on in the process of actually bringing different stakeholders together to help our cause. The health perspective is very, very important for people, and it resonates with the public. I'm not saying that the public always considers this as it should be considered. I mean, we see by the public, by all of us, let's say, perhaps certain lifestyles and behavior that is not very healthy at all. But it does bring a different perspective to the conversation, to the debate. We have seen that ears open when you start talking about health, especially with the EU policymakers. So it's a very, very useful tool. Let's say to engage and to focus more on the positive health aspects of a transition to plant-based foods. The physicians and the medical community, I think, is very important in this sense. However, it's not necessarily so easy to bring them on board. We have tried this. I have tried in Greece, for example, to bring doctors on board, and we hear a lot about, I don't know, perhaps misconceptions about the so-called need for meat and animal products. So in a way, our role should also be to educate doctors and to educate the medical community, because they're not necessarily up to speed with the latest evidence regarding the benefits of transitioning to more plant-based foods. However, at policy level, we are engaging already with them, and we are in a coalition with the European Public Health Alliance and others and they very much are they are very helpful in bringing on board this particular point about health, which as I said before, it resonates very well with policymakers, much more so than some of our arguments.
Thank you so much, Olga. And with this, we have already reached the end of our panel. From identifying the most shocking examples of hidden costs in our retailer-based food system to learning about a variety of effective approaches to make change in Europe, Latin America, and beyond. From identifying gaps that need to be tackled to accelerate the progress that we want to see and achieve ultimately our targets in the next 5 years and beyond. 2 pointed questions from the audience. It has been quite a ride. I would like to use the chance to thank my panelists for all your lovely and really insightful and inspiring contributions, the Vegan Summit, and especially the Green Ref Institute for hosting us today. And please join me in giving them a warm round of silent applause. Last but not least, I would like to invite you to attend the upcoming panel discussion, which is called Food Education 2.0, How Much Do We Really Know About What We Eat, which begins at 6:45. And with that, I wish you a good rest of the day and a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to all. Bye.
Sorry, did you say we're starting now? Hi, everybody, and welcome to the European Vegan Summit 2025. Great to have you all with us. I hope you're here at the correct session, which is all about food education. Just to recap, we're going to be exploring on this panel the critical role of food education in shaping the way we eat, think, and act. In an age of complex supply chains, aggressive marketing, and ever-changing health advice, understanding what's on our plates has never been more vital. Just to introduce myself, I'm Colette Fox from ProVeg International, and I'm our public food lead, and I'll be moderating this panel this evening. And I'd like to introduce our 5 amazing power women who are joining. So we'll go from the top. We have Valentina Taglietti. Valentina leads the Sustainable Food Department at Acere Animali, promoting plant-based diets through campaigns like Veganuary. She developed Meno per più and Mense per il clima to help canteens become more plant-based and climate-friendly. In 2024, she launched the University Caterer ranking, included in Italy's national guidelines. Next, we have Maja Blasnik. Maja is a psychologist and founder of the Empathy-Based Society Institute in Slovenia. She works at the intersection of psychology, social change, and systems transformation, promoting empathy as a practical tool for personal and societal well-being. Welcome, Maja, to our panel. Do we have Emily? Not yet. We'll move forwards. We will have Emily Angus, who is a registered dietitian working for the Vegan Society in the UK, who has a professional background in vegan nutrition, research, and renal dietetics. Her current role includes developing evidence-based nutrition resources, providing educational sessions on plant-based nutrition, and responding to queries relating to vegan diets from the public and other healthcare professionals. We also have with us Lorena Mock, who is the founder and CEO of the Educated Choices Programme, which is a global nonprofit focused on how food choices impact human and planetary health. With 16 years of experience, Lorena has led the programme's international expansion and partnerships. Welcome today, Lorena. And last but not least, we have Nadia Tanoli, who is the Food Policy Officer for the Municipality of Bergamo. With a background in European environmental projects, she now focuses on food policy. Through the Food Trails project, she launched the Good Canteen pilot to promote plant-based meals in schools, and she currently works to expand green menus across canteens, bars, and restaurants to support healthy, sustainable diets in Bergamo. So welcome, Nadia. Hopefully Emily will join us. That will be great. But we'll kick off. I've got the opening question, which is to all of you. And then we'll dig into some bespoke questions for each of our panelists. And we'll have time at the end, hopefully 10 to 15 minutes for everybody who's joined us this evening to ask any questions. But please feel free to pop those in the chat in the meantime. So the opening question is, with so many competing messages around food, health, and sustainability, how can we ensure that people, especially younger generations, have access to clear, reliable, and empowering information about what they eat? Valentina, would you like to kick us off?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Colette, for the perfect presentation. And I think that people should be engaged at a very young age, as you said, preferably at school, with targeted programs taking place in both classrooms and canteens. And the more participation, the better. I think maybe Nadia Zanoni will have a lot to say about that. And with that said, with young adults, I think we have less resources. It's a completely different scenario. Behavioral science shows us that people don't change their habits because of rule or information. they change their habits when they feel part of a shared movement. Real empowerment comes from belonging, and I think that's the reason why we are all here today. And like when food choices are framed not as only as individual choices, but as a way to join a community effort to create something bigger for health, climate, social, and animal justice. So I think this could be the key. And this sense of community, of course, it starts in small groups where people are bound to each other, and then common rituals like meat-free days are great to connect those groups, and they allow individuals to feel part of something bigger. And of course, communication plays a big role in that because people see that their small efforts are contributing to a collective success. So this is my my take about this question.
Thank you so much, Valentina. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with lots of what you've said. And yeah, the small things make the big difference. Maja, would you like to go next and give us your response?
Yes, thank you, Colette, for introduction, and hello, everybody. Yes, I agree. I agree that schools should be on the front line of providing young people with the latest accurate information on this topic, together to give them the practical experience, what it means, a healthy food choice in school canteens, all of which my excellent co-panelists are already active in. The other thing I see as a problematic generally in society is that we are anthropocentric society. We look at everything from the perspective that we humans are the center of everything and all other beings and ecosystems are below us. And in that way, we communicate also about food. We communicate how is this food beneficial to my health? How is it beneficial to the taste? How is it beneficial in the context of profit? And that's why I think if we really want to make a real shift, we need to shift from anthropocentric perspective into ecocentric perspective, where all members of ecosystem are equal partners. And in that context, also food becomes a point of connection between people, farmers, animals, plants, ecosystems. And some schools already offer programs with this experiential connection, but I think it should become a mainstream in schools, like Valentina also suggested. And there is another thing that I would like to mention is that we need to meet young people at where they are. And right now they are on social media, they're online all the time. And these spaces prefer to get viral than to be accurate. And regardless, I think that we need to meet them there. But I don't mean that only in digital sense, but also in developmental, psychological sense, that we just see which stories, which talk to them, what is like authentic to them, and then incorporate all this information that we want to convey to them through this type of content. Thank you.
Thank you, Maja. I think we don't have Emily yet, so we'll move to Lorena. Would you like to give your take on the question, Lorena, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Colette. I agree, of course. I think education should be centered around the institutions where kids learn on a day-to-day basis and also online. This is one of the reasons why our program, from going with boots on the ground, we decided to go completely digital because kids spend a lot of time online. But of course, kids are very smart. So if what we impart, the knowledge that we share with them is not accurate or we're exaggerating facts, I think they can fact check us in no time. So it's a responsibility of ours, educators, to be very truthful, to recognize our failures, to learn what takes our audiences, right? Are they more interested in health or the environment? What about their teachers? And very importantly, it needs to be free. Food education is a right. There should not be a charge for it. And I think that educators should be also trained to impart such education. So if we're talking about schools, I would love to see continuing this kind of education, not as an ideology, but science-based, evidence-based, because then it changes as we evolve. And I think the role of education is that, right, is to create critical thinking, invite discussion in order to create progress. And the only way to do it is by inviting everyone to the table, right? There's no the good guys and the bad guys, because we're in this boat together. And kids know that. So when Valentina mentioned that change is not about the individual, but about the community, I wholeheartedly agree. We can educate one kid, but if that kid does not belong, that he or she or they are part of a greater movement, we have a much lower chance for them to develop those skills and then pass them on. One thing that we've learned through our program is that when kids absorb new information, they tend to share it with at least 15 other people. And that's the incredible ripple effect of education. So I think we need to ride that momentum and to collaborate with institutions so they know the tools to impart this education from any perspective that may fit them better. For example, a PE coach, a physical education coach, could come from the fitness and health perspective. A science educator could come from the environmental perspective, etc. So I think there's a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of tools in our repertoire too.
Thank you so much, Lorena. Yeah, children are very powerful little creatures for getting this change to happen. We'll move to Nadia next, if that's okay, Nadia. Do you want to let us know what your thoughts are?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. For the Bergamo municipality, the goal is to transform healthy and sustainable eating from the lesson into habits. For reach this goal, Bergamo municipality thanks to the European funds, implemented a great project named Green Menu. With this menu, we introduce every week one plant-based menu in all levels of school, from kindergarten to the secondary school. But we support this introduction with an holistic approach to education. We organize many workshops for students. They taste, play with beans and the other ingredients they find also in the menus. They visit the farmers, the local farmers. Also, we propose the training for teachers, the training for school canteens committees, and also we involve the parents in the info days to taste, to learn how it is possible to cook the same dishes that their child find and eat in the school canteens. And also we change our tender because we increase the criteria about organic and local food. And also we organize many training for kitchen staff and chef, because it is important they change their way to cook the dishes. For us, it is our key factor to become a success, because now this project is not a pilot, but it is an ordinary action for our school. Every week we have 1 day plant-based menu. It is, for us, it's a big results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I love that it's just becoming completely normal in Bergamo. That's great. I think we're missing Emily still, so we will move on to our main questions for everybody. So Valentina, you are first. So you combine food education with public policy. I'm interested in what lessons have emerged from projects like Mense per il Clima and the University Catering ranking about effectively promoting plant-based diets in institutional settings.
Thank you so much for the question. And all right, with the ranking, we assessed the menus of Italian university canteens based on the presence of plant-based dishes. So the more plant-based options, the higher the score. This was our rule. And our ranking was very well received and sparked a national level debate. And at the end of the process, what we learned is that choosing to highlight the best practices that were already in charge in some universities, rather than focusing on the gaps, allowed us to keep the ranking positive and constructive. And in some way, it fostered a good competition between the canteens. And it also led to a change, actually, because in less than 1 year, many menus changed in a plant-based way. So you have to know that in Italy, less than 50% of universities had a plant-based main course every day. So it was like impossible to eat plant-based in Italian canteens. And okay, I'm freezed. No, it's okay. It was like, and now is more frequent. And actually, our ranking contributed to inspiring the new national guidelines, as you previously said, Colette, for sustainable university canteens. This means that there is one official document that addresses all the canteens and the cafeterias to include at least one plant-based meal per day. And it includes also a tender model, so they can copy that. They don't even do much effort, so that it's guaranteed every day. And Mense per il Clima is our university campaign to raise awareness about the importance of protein transition in the students' community. And the campaign is still at an early stage because first we focused on doing this kind of photography, which is the ranking to address the institution, and then we are engaging the students, and we are facing with some difficulties. Maybe we can talk about this later. But what it's already clear for us now is that tasting events and workshops are a great way to engage students, and they allow us to let them try new dishes, to talk about food in a different way. And this is especially effective when matched with an effective communication, both online and offline. So we have a lot to do, but what we learned is that we need to be more present and with a physical presence, not only an online presence, because these individuals can be very like alone, even if they're part of a group. So we have to build this sense of community, this sense of doing this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love the rankings and how that creates the competition to kind of really drive things. Everybody starts to want to be better than everyone else. You touched upon some of the difficulties. I'm just interested, what do you think are the most common barriers that you encounter when you're introducing climate-friendly plant-based meals in canteens, and how can the barriers be successfully addressed?
I'd say the main barriers are like a mix of skepticism and old kitchen habits. And it's strange to say that because, okay, Italy is known for their amazing food, but actually the canteen food is not that amazing that you can taste. In my experience, both students and the kitchen staff aren't willing to try new plant-based recipes, mostly because of biases and because they had a bad experience before, especially the chefs. So most cooks and chefs that are working in canteens aren't really into food innovation, as we can imagine in the restaurant field or so on. So they're really stuck to old habits, to old recipes, and usually they don't know how to properly cook plant-based recipes with plant-based proteins, or like tofu or tempeh, or even to give a new dish with the beans. Okay, so kitchen trainings are crucial to address this issue. And this summer we trained over more than 100 chefs on plant-based kitchen, and we help them to develop and to try new plant-based recipes which were easier and tastier to prepare. So we have the chefs issue, and the chef's trainings. I think it's the most important part to do this. I'm freezed. No, okay. Sometimes
You're
okay.
fine. You're fine.
Perfect. It's my laptop that is freezing myself. And then we have the student skepticism, which was kind of a surprise for me, because I thought, okay, the new generation are really into plant-based diets or are really curious. And then I figured that it wasn't really like that. So to boost the students' appetite for new flavors, we usually work with nudging techniques. Behavioral science shows us that every aspect of the environment is important to enhance the attention, like how the menu is written, which adjective I chose to describe the plant-based dish, where the plant-based options are displayed in the canteens, and so on. So we use, of course, these strategies, these little nudges, but the skepticism is really strong, and that means that even if we have a good, beautiful, and tasty recipe, it doesn't mean it will be successful, because maybe the students won't even try that. So nowadays, students in Italy are really they tend to stick to their old food habits, such as eating meat every day, or they avoid beans, and they're really frustrating, of course, because like they're active in the climate way, and then they don't connect these issues. And so we use tasting events, and tasting events are a good way to let them try new flavors and to help them to step out of their comfort zone. So to sum up, lasting change happens only when all parties, both chefs and students, feel part of the transformation, and see that their contribution really matters for creating a better future. So it's not just try this new recipe, but this new recipe that I developed to be part of the change, and it is made for you, and you, by eating that, can be part of this change together with us. So I think this can be our next goals. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Valentina. It all sounds very familiar to me, and yeah, you've got to put all these component parts together to make it work. I'm interested, what's been your most popular plant-based dish at universities that students have liked?
The most popular?
Yeah, what's most popular?
Currently, we have this cecina, which is like a flatbread but made of chickpea flour. So it's like a typical dish in some region of Italy, like Tuscany or Liguria. And it's good because it's traditional food. And with the new recipes, there is this lentil curry that was developed by our training chef, and it was one of the best recipe last year. So it was like, okay, they're the one of the lentil curry, so we can rely on them for the recipe. So yeah,
very good. You need to share these recipes with us all so we can copy them. Okay, thank you. Marja, it'd be great to run some questions by you next. So I'm just interested, what role does empathy as both a psychological and a practical tool play in food education and in fostering more conscious attitudes towards food and its wider impacts?
Well, we cannot really talk about empathy without talking about violence, unfortunately, because they are neurologically linked, they overlap in our brain, and they switch each other off. So if we stimulate empathy, violence is switched off, and if we stimulate violence, empathy is switched off. And it's the environment that activates them. And that's why empathy is so crucial also within the food education, because we as society, we have normalized violence towards people, towards animals, towards nature and the planet, and we have built economic system on this logic. And today we are also completely disconnected from every stage of our food production. And it's empathy that starting to close this gap of disconnection. And we at our Empathy-Based Society Institute, we are developing, among other things, also programs for purposeful development of empathy towards people, animals, nature, and the planet. And we are guiding participants through structured perspective-taking activities. They actually step in the shoes of others, whether these are animals in factory farming, farmers facing climate crisis, ecosystem, for example, a river filled with trash. And this type of techniques and experiences, they help also in the food context. For example, these empathic connections help us move from asking a question, what do I want to eat today, towards to what and who am I connected to when through my meal. And there is another thing that I would like to talk about within food education, and that is normalization of violence in the context of our school systems, particularly vocational training for butchers, because this is a school program that is present in many European countries as part of a traditional school system, and children can enroll in this program after they finish elementary school, which means at the age of 15. And in this program, they learn all the skills that butchers have, and among others, this is of course also killing of animals. So at the age of 15, they start to learn how to stun animals with guns, with electricity, with gas, how to slaughter them, how to bleed them out, how to cut them up with chainsaws. And research is showing that even for adult butchers, this work is causing significant psychological damage and mental health issues. But we need to look at this program also within the developmental phase of these teenagers, because we know that adolescent brain is undergoing the biggest reorganizational process of the life. And it's very important which kind of experiences, which kind of new behaviors are these young people subjected to. So we need to ask ourselves, what kind of school program have we created already? I mean, it's been going on for many, many years. But this is just to show how this normalization of violence, how we are so disconnected from animal suffering within our food system, that we consequently are completely disconnected also from the children within this process and their well-being. And this example shows another paradox, because when we have children that are killing and torturing animals, we consider this a mental health issue and a sign for potential future psychopathology. But when we teach children to do a job where they will kill animals for 8 hours a day, we consider it's perfectly okay to be part of the school system. And this is complete nonsense. And that's why it's so important that empathy is key to counter normalization of violence within food education and within food education.
Thank you, Marja. It's such important work that you're doing. Yeah, I feel like in the work that I'm doing, it's really removed and we don't get into these discussions. So it's wonderful to hear this is happening. I'm also interested from your sort of psychological perspective, what are the main internal or social obstacles that are preventing people from changing their eating habits, even when they have this knowledge, when they're informed about health and sustainability?
A few months ago, I was at the conference and the CEO of a successful plant-based company was asked a similar question. He was asked, how do we get people to buy more vegan food? And he said, after all these years in business, I can share one thing with you, that it's easier to convert people to another religion than it is for them to change what they eat. So yes, this is a huge challenge in front of us. And the question is, yes, why it is so difficult? And Valentina already tackled this point a little bit. Because I think, in my opinion, it's so difficult because it's never just about food. Food is so deeply connected to everything, so many things, so many aspects of our lives, whether it's our emotions, our community, our culture, our identity. And there is some fear, deep ingrained fear, that if there's something changes, people will lose some parts of them. And yes, there are several psychological and social obstacles that have been recognized that affect or restrict people from changing. And number one, for sure, is taste and pleasure, because taste has been recognized as number one driver for food choice, and familiar flavors are connected to nostalgia, are connected to reward systems in our brains. And people are afraid that if they will change something in this regard, that they will lack also all other consequences. Another thing is cognitive dissonance, which is very popular lately when we have two conflicting beliefs. For example, I love animals and at the same time I love meat. There is this discomfort that arises, and instead of changing something about it, we usually just justify them both so that we don't have to change anything. And the next, another thing is so-called willful ignorance, which is a step before cognitive dissonance. This is a stage where I prefer even not to know what is going on, so that I will not have to deal with unpleasant emotions. So it's more in the light of like ignorance is bliss in this context. Then there is identity. Identity is a huge thing, because also regarding food choices can be connected to our identity. We connect them to who we are, through food we connect to our culture, family, possibly also values, and changing them can feel for some people like losing part of them. And so also in politics, when they researched, they realized that when some political beliefs come to the level of identity, it's really difficult to change them. And I think we are facing the same thing regarding food. And then there are habits, because we are eating is part of routine, and we are creatures of routine, and exactly, we really don't want to change. We like to think as little as possible, just to go with the flow that is familiar to us. There are many others, but I think I'm really by the end of my time frame. But I would like just to point out one thing more. All these things that I listed now, they're all about me, again, anthropocentric, How does this affect my taste? How does this affect my habits, my identity, my comfort? So I circle back to this anthropocentric frame of thinking. And I think if you really want to start changing some really significant long-term changes, we also need to start address and shift this narrative into connection, into community, into belonging, into the bigger picture.
Thank you very much, Maja. Super interesting. Yeah, it's very complicated. We all have a lot of work to do here. I think we don't have Emily still. I'm just double checking. No, we won't. So we will skip to Lorena, please. So, Lorena, in your experience, which topics around the impact of food on human and planetary health tend to surprise or deeply resonate with students the most?
That's a great question. What resonates the most with students based on our outreach is of course, the intersection between personal health and planetary health. For example, many students for the first time are able to make the connection between their dietary choices and certain chronic diseases that see in their close circle, right? When you think about type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, or certain cancers that are so predominant in today's society, chances are that that kid knows someone in their peer circle or their family circle that is suffering from that chronic disease. So that is the first step of awareness that we realize, wow, they made the connection because they talk about it. And that makes them feel also a little bit helpless, right? Because then you realize, it could be me too, right? I'm not exempt of not following that path. Of course, they're deeply, deeply struck by the environmental footprint of industrial animal agriculture when they learn about it through our presentations. After all, they're inheriting this planet. They know it. And like Masha said, sometimes ignorance is bliss, right? But we can't stay ignorant, and we don't want people to stay ignorant. And I think nobody wants to stay ignorant on purpose. So when you're part of a group and you are receiving that information as a group, you are not singled out. You suddenly realize, I'm part of this group that is receiving this information, and it's concerning, right? Some students are deeply, deeply concerned about biodiversity loss, for example. It's depending where they live, their cultures, right? Others are very worried about climate change or water usage, etc. And I think that realization is what makes them consider the rest of the information that we usually partake, right? We usually give them bad news first, and then the good news, because we always want them to end up on a good note. So when students realize that the decisions that they're making can affect positively or negatively the health, it's sort of like an aha moment, right? We've seen it through the years. They go from feeling powerless to feeling powerful, because for the first time, all those things that seem completely out of their control, they are now becoming a little bit part of what they can become, right? Society often tells us who we need to be. But I think the more information we partake in the kindest, more respectful way, right? I think we start receiving the message that, I want to become who I want to be, right? And we know that message needs to be imparted many, many times before it's even received. That's why I think that food education should be accessible and should be part of every school, every club, every nursing home, every book club and mom's club, etc., because everyone can partake of this information in very easy, relatable ways. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Thank you, Lorena. It's interesting. I would think, looking back many decades to being a young person, that I wouldn't think of health as being, you would imagine you would need to make changes when you're a bit older, and that it wouldn't be so important to you at that young age. But that's really interesting that young people are thinking that way.
I mean, they feel incredibly invincible, right?
Yeah, you do.
But that doesn't mean they're not worried because one of their parents might have had blood pressure or things like that. And nowadays we see peers developing type 2 diabetes very early. Hence, we don't call it adult onset diabetes anymore. So I think we're changing a lot. And also the fact that when you and I were younger, we didn't have the information at the tip of our fingers. And that makes them grow up faster and being exposed to the reality of harsh life much earlier too.
Yeah, I'm glad we have the program that we do. So thank you. Now, obviously, this is a huge, vast global program that you're leading. Do you notice significant cultural differences in food literacy and awareness between different countries? And how do you sort of adapt to that?
Oh, absolutely. Cultural differences are vast and significant depending on their life circumstances, their background, their territory. Currently, we have learners in 65 plus countries. And what we call learners, or who we call learners, I'm sorry, are anyone who's 8 and up. So we have kids as young as 8 years old and adults in their hundreds who watch our presentations, depending on what stage of their life is and what it is that they want to do with this information. Adults usually worry a lot about their health and their legacy. So the planet is important to them too, is what we've seen. So what we notice is that some cultures are more aware about environmental issues, while other cultures come with a baggage of traditional foods and culture. So they're more focused on food and health. And that's why it's so important to meet them at where they are. What we do is that we adapt, we ground our presentations on global statistics. So everyone can relate no matter what, right? They're part of this beautiful planet that we all inhabit. Planet A, there's no plan B, right? But coupled with that, with those global statistics, we make sure we give examples that are tied to their localities, whether it's case studies or some environmental information, or if there's a specific chronic disease that is more abundant. And of course, food, right? The food we feature to our Latin American audience is not the same food that we feature to our US audience, for example. We also make sure that the translations are not just linguistic, but cultural, because those nuances, those differences matter deeply. We don't always get it right, but we try. We try our best, and I think that our different audiences can tell that we're doing our best, because we want our learners to feel represented and respected. We celebrate cultural differences, right? Because we're part of this melting pot that makes us so interesting and so valuable. And lastly, we want to make sure that no matter where they are, that we provide tools that have to do with their culture and accessibility, right? Not everyone can access healthy food. So how do we teach those people to be more inventive, right? More to use their ingenuity. We connect them with food banks, et cetera, et cetera. So we do take care very much on the differences of our audience because one size does not fit all in this case.
Thank you so much, Lorena. That's fabulous. I'm just going to do a quick shout out to our wonderful audience. If you have any questions for the panelists, please do pop them in the Q&A. We have a little bit of extra time. We're ahead of time because we're missing one of our panelists, so more time for your questions. We will move on to Nadia, our last panelist. So Nadia, what are the key takeaways that have emerged from the Good Canteen pilot? What's worked well? What still needs refining to implement plant-based meals in schools?
Yes, thank you for this question. In our Good Canteen pilot, worked well. The first key factor is the strong political commitment, because our city council in 2023 approved a food policy strategy. In this formal document, there are 8 objectives, but one is for promoting sustainable school canteens, but for all citizens. This is important for because we are a public administration. Second one is we plan this pilot with all partners. We worked with a provider of school canteens. We work with the association of farmers. We work also with head of school vegan nutritionists, because we heard their doubts. We collected their proposal. We collect also needs for this change. And this big partnership, it's important for if you want to change something, and this change during in the time in different years. And also the great factor is the community engagement, because we organize, yes, educational activities to share knowledge about plant-based menu, but also we organize many practical activities. The parents, the teachers, they cooked in our school kitchen center. They cooked the same dishes in their children find in the green menu. And during the session of show cooking, they cook, but also they ask to our nutritionist the doubts, or they ask how it is possible that my son eat this kind of dish. Our nutritionist suggests some tips for their children. It is an important engagement, peer-to-peer. It is because we organize many kitchen sessions. Yeah, in my opinion, it is the best practice, because the parents know better its menu, and they are happy to become an active role in this change. Yes, for our it's the key factor is this. And we have to improve we want to continue the dialogue with the local farmers, because with the climate change events, in many times we don't have enough local product for our green menu. And we want to continue the dialogue, because it's too difficult for them serve our school canteens, because we want to continue this menu, organic, local, and vegan. Another question is, we reach this goal because we receive much funds from the European Commission. Yes, the municipality now continue these activities, but the funds, it's not like the quantity like European Commission. Like less funds, we organize less activities, but we continue. For example, this year we started from a kindergarten classroom, and we have the same active role, but the activities are less than the last 2 years. And we want to continue. Also, for the communication, maybe sometimes we don't communicate well our pilot, because it's important to raise awareness also the citizens, not only for the parents but also grandparents and the general citizen. Yes, maybe we want to improve and become more stronger message for the citizen in general. Yeah.
Thank you, Nadia.
Complaint.
I wondered, you mentioned organic, local, and vegan, and I'm just interested in the language and the use of the word vegan. And is that the language that you use in Bergamo, or there's always lots of discussion around whether we talk about vegan food or plant-based or plant-rich? But I just, I just wondered how that works where you are.
We introduce this plant-based menu named green menu, because in Italy, green is one person thinks, oh, environment, healthy. For the name is green menu, but it is vegan because it is vegetarian. All ingredients are vegetarian. But we named this with another words for the Italian people. Is green is for the environment, is for healthy. For us, the name is green menu. Climate friendly, yes, it's the subtitle, but for us it's a vegan, plant-based menu. It's a vegan, but we change the name. Yeah.
Perfect. I just was curious. And your work shows that local food policy obviously creates real change. What other actions is Bergamo taking to extend sustainable food practices beyond schools and into public restaurants and beyond?
Yeah, we extended the green menu project also for bar and restaurants and collective canteens, like canteens of the Hospital of Bergamo and the canteens of University of Bergamo. This project is planning with the local healthy agency. And when, for example, I explain what is our green menu for bar and restaurant. One restaurant want to adhere of our project, they fill one declaration. In this declaration, they declare that they, in their menu, they offer in each courses one vegan option, from starter to dessert. It is mandatory criteria to adhere of our green menu. After, we also add other environment criteria, like decrease plastic or avoid plastic, and for example, put enough portion in the middle of table, enough portion about bread to avoid waste, and the other criteria. But the base criteria to adhere of our school green menu is to propose every day for the consumers, citizens, and so on, vegan course, vegan dishes for each courses. If they declare this action, they receive from the municipality a logo, green menu. They can put this logo on their windows, and also they receive a logo for the menu, because they put this logo in order to define their dishes. They receive also flyers that maybe it is like less copies, because we are climate friendly, but also we send PDF flyers, and in this flyer we explain in very easy way how it's important to decrease animal protein and increase vegetable protein. It's for health with the data. It's not so many data. It's simple to read for whole citizen, and also for the environment. It is a flyer, little flyer they have in their shops or restaurants or bars. And also for the school collective canteens, we share our public tender, because it's important when a school, hospital, or a university change the provider, or they publish the public tender. It's important to have some criteria. After this, you can introduce a plant-based menu. we support them. We share the document, we answer their doubts or questions, and yes, it is a shared knowledge and the documents also. Yeah. And the second one, the last, we organize every year a big festival for citizens, named Agriculture and Right to Food. In this festival, we have different events, workshop, farmer markets, conferences for different targets. This year, for example, the topic is protein transition. We organize, for example, one event with a vegan food blogger, and a wine events, for example, wine and vegan food blogger for and we organize a big conference to promote our school canteens, plant-based menu, and so on for different targets. This year we focus this big festival to decrease animal protein in diet of our citizens.
I love the idea of the festival, making it fun and bringing everyone together. And wine too, that also sounds positive.
Because wine attracts young people or general people. And when they drink good wine of produced in Bergamo province, also they see our vegan food blogger, they explain, they make something very quickly, and they taste some vegan options, vegan dishes. Vegan snack, it depends. I don't know which is it. It is a surprise. It will be.
It sounds wonderful. I'd like to come along to this festival. I'm sure we all would. And I'm also, just a final quick question. What's the most popular of your plant-based dishes in schools? What's the winner?
The winner K factor or the winner dishes?
The winner dishes, yeah.
The winner dishes is lentils balls. They love it. Lentils. Our children love lentils in all kind of dishes. Yeah.
So we've got the lentil balls and we've got the lentil curry for the students.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lentil soup also.
Okay, the lentils. This is good. This is what we need to be serving. Thank you. Thanks, Nadia. That's great. So that brings us to question and answer time. We have a few questions. Please, if anybody has any more, pop them in the Q&A. I will start to work through. Thank you to Eleanor for answering the broccoli question already. That was very handy, saved us a job. Emily is here. Sorry, apologies. Let me skip to you. Emily, I can't see you. Here we go. Hi.
I am here. I'm so sorry. My
That's
computer
okay.
for the time difference, so all my alerts have been an hour behind, and I only just realised. So I can only apologise for being so late, and I hope the discussion's been really lovely so far.
It's been wonderful, and we're glad you're here. And we will, let's. I've already introduced you. We'll skip the general question, and I'll ask you your kind of specific questions, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. So, Emily, what does vegan inclusive healthcare look like in practice, and why do you believe it should be a standard part of the curriculum for vocational courses?
Yeah, so we've been doing a huge amount of work on the knowledge gap that exists for healthcare professionals at the moment when it comes to veganism, that unfortunately does still exist to quite a large degree. So to us, vegan inclusive healthcare looks like providers understanding that veganism is an ethical standpoint, and actually in the UK it's protected under equality law. I believe that's the same for other countries in the EU as well. And providers need to understand that that comes with a responsibility to be knowledgeable about the needs of their vegan clients and patients, and be able to advise them in line with those beliefs. And we know that that's not currently the case at the moment. So we did a survey of our members and supporters last year to see what their experiences were like accessing NHS care in the last 3 years or so. And actually 59% of people reported that they'd had negative experiences related to their vegan beliefs. And that included kind of a lack of understanding from healthcare professionals, and even sort of prejudice or hostility towards those decisions, as well as not being considered in terms of the treatment plan. So whether that's diet, medication, other lifestyle changes. So we know that there's obviously a really big education gap in terms of training for healthcare professionals in the UK. And that being trained in vegan inclusive practice could make a really big difference to not only sort of reducing the stigma that vegans sometimes face in healthcare, but also ensuring that their needs are adequately met in those spaces as well. So we don't want people to be anxious about accessing healthcare and about the response that they're going to get from their healthcare providers. And actually, we find that even so, my profession, dietitians, we also had a look at the knowledge of dietitians, and we're considered like the experts clinically in food and nutrition. Only kind of 2/3 of those were aware of veganism's protected characteristic. And only a third felt very confident in tailoring their practice, so the dietary recommendations that they were making for patients coming into their care to vegan diets. And that was kind of a gap both in terms of the nutritional aspects and also the ethical side of what vegans choose to eat. So I know that other people have been working on sort of plant-based nutrition, and have found in the healthcare space that actually plant-based sometimes gets a bit more traction and a bit less resistance than saying vegan. But as the Vegan Society, we're really underlining that actually this is also an equality and diversity issue, and that we want to make sure that we're saying vegan to healthcare professionals and making them aware of their responsibilities and patients' needs to actually reduce that stigma and improve that understanding, and then ultimately improve kind of the outcomes that people are getting when they're going to see their healthcare providers. So yeah, vegan inclusive nutrition education kind of looks like addressing the potential stigmas that might exist, the pre-existing beliefs, kind of exploring healthcare providers' gaps in their knowledge that they've identified, and making sure that professionals feel confident when they come out of their university education, when they come across veganism in practice, that they're able to tailor those treatment plans and make sure that they're stacking up to those kind of standards of diversity and inclusion as well. So I think as the Vegan Society, we're kind of a little bit unique in coming in from more the equality and diversity angle of inclusive practice rather than kind of the health benefits of plant-based nutrition, which of course we talk about a lot as well. But I think there's a gap in addressing how people are able to support patients who are already vegan. And obviously you can be vegan and have a multitude of maybe different health conditions, and it's about being able to be flexible and meet the needs of that population. So that's kind of what vegan inclusive healthcare looks like to us.
Thank you, Emily. And what kind of reactions do you typically face in healthcare and educational institutions when you're advocating for vegan inclusive teaching, and how do you respond to skepticism?
Yeah, so I mean, I think unfortunately there still is quite a lot of skepticism and sort of resistance, again, particularly around the word vegan. I mean, other organizations doing great work in the space in terms of normalizing plant-based diets have kind of found that the term plant-based has less resistance. So I'm definitely finding that people feel like the word vegan is something that you can't say when you're kind of talking to healthcare professionals. But actually, as I've said, I feel like that's really, really important in reducing the stigma, making sure that professionals are aware that there's a difference and there's that ethical stance that kind of will also make differences, for example, what kind of medications are acceptable for somebody. So I feel like there is resistance to the word vegan, and what I'd like us to do is have that inclusive practice and teaching that kind of strips back that stigma and that resistance to talking about veganism as it is. I think there's still a lot of prevailing myths about the importance of animal products in people's diets. Obviously, I mean, even the British Dietetic Association and the American Academy of Dietetics are quite clear that vegan diets, fully vegan diets, can support healthy living at all life stages. But there's still a lot of prevailing myths among healthcare professionals that we need some kind of level of animal products. So that feeling that, oh, even if we're moving towards plant-based, but don't we need a little bit of this, a little bit of that? And I feel like those existing beliefs and biases sometimes take a little while to unpick, and particularly when healthcare professionals are extremely busy and maybe they're not kind of up to date with the research in plant-based because they're really having to focus their time and energy on very specific areas of development. So what we want to do with that is to make it accessible to have this training. So make sure we're engaging with professionals in ways that kind of brings the learning to them in a way that they don't have to kind of go and research that whole knowledge base and kind of update those assumptions. And I think that we are finding that there is an appetite for that from healthcare professionals. I mean, when we put out our dietetics survey, what we did find is that 93% of people said, yes, we would like training on veganism and how to improve our clinical practice. So we know that people do really want to address that knowledge gap as well, which is really reassuring because sometimes I think we think a lot about the barriers, but there's actually a lot of appetite for learning and supporting people more effectively in the vegan community, which is obviously great. And also bringing that kind of standard training into the university curriculum, and that kind of ultimately I say it's kind of like my evil plan is to like bring inclusive, vegan inclusive training into all the universities in the UK that do firstly sort of dietetics courses. And that's something that we're working on and actually finding that as well as dietitians who are already in practice, who are showing that they'd like more information on this, student dietitians sort of more anecdotally are very, very keen to learn more about veganism. So we've done quite a lot of work so far with universities in the UK, kind of offering this proactive teaching package that allows them to kind of integrate vegan inclusive healthcare and that we can come in and deliver that. So again, kind of reducing those time and kind of, I guess, entry costs of starting to make the curriculum more inclusive to vegans. And there's been a lot of interest in that, and a lot of universities have said, actually, yeah, our students are really curious about this. They'd like to learn more. And that's been across dietetics courses, but also other areas like sports nutrition. People are, yeah, keen to have that knowledge, which is really, really reassuring. And we've also been able to sort of offer placements with the Vegan Society for Student Dietitians. So hoping that kind of through starting with dietitians and getting that vegan inclusive healthcare in, we know that dietitians would like to have this training. There's definitely the knowledge base within our nutrition team at the Vegan Society to sort of address those myths, to talk more about those ethical nuances, to talk more about the sort of diversity and inclusion criteria that they need to be meeting with their patients. And actually, yeah, in some circles there seems to be resistance, but actually there's quite a lot of hope there, and people are very open to us coming in and talking to them. And I'm hoping that through sort of talking to dietitians first, we're getting that food and nutrition education. Then when dietitians are going out into workplaces where, you know, working in multidisciplinary teams, they're talking then to doctors and nurses and to other healthcare professionals and kind of spreading that knowledge outwards. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, I think the key thing there for me, well, with everything that everyone is doing here, is making it as simple as possible for everybody, that it's an easy choice, whatever it is we're trying to get them to do, make it simple and ideally make it free. Thank you. I'm so glad you were able to join us. That's wonderful.
Thank you for bearing with me. I'm really glad that I managed to pick up with you.
Not at all. So we've got time, a few minutes for some questions. I just wanted to answer Jules's question about butchery courses at the age of 15. I think that was Marja who talked about that. So I'm guessing that is a Slovenian thing, but perhaps Marja, you'd like to respond. Maybe it's in other places.
No, it's actually not only Slovenian thing. I wrote a paper on this and I researched through the European Union. I remember now, it was a few years ago that I did this. I remember UK doesn't have this program, but majority of European countries have this as part of vocational training. I know many countries changed in the past years the school system, so now it's called, I don't know, something food-related occupations. And it was actually quite difficult to get information on these courses because somehow on some level they are aware that it's problematic, but it's not only Slovenia, no. Majority of European countries have these programs.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. I just have a question. We touched at the very beginning around the sort of influence of social media and that kids are all online these days. And I just wondered, just a really quick, like, couple of lines from each of you perhaps on what kind of role do you think social media influences and people creating content can play in sort of shaping food literacy? Can they be our allies and help us with these kind of ethical messages that we're aiming to promote? I'll let you unmute and let me know what you think, or if anybody in particular wants to answer.
I'd love to answer.
Go for it, Lorena.
Work with so many students and they immediately say, but this person and this person, we're like, who's that? An influencer. So I think that their role is crucial in promoting a plant-forward diet, plant-based diet, or whatever every program is doing right here. The problems arise when influencers are not aligned with evidence-based information. It's a double-edged sword, right? Misinformation can spread like wildfire. So I think the strategy should be to partner as much as possible with evidence-based interested influencers that can be the storytellers, the content producers, because kids sometimes trust them more than they trust the information from traditional institutions. So I'm all for it. I just think we need to do our homework and allow those that support science-based evidence information to come and tell the story and reach as many people as possible. That's my take.
Love it. Thank you, Lorena. Would anybody else like to say anything on that point?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think this is a really big problem at the moment that's kind of challenging evidence-based nutrition is actually that a lot of people are getting their nutrition and health information online because people want to have that accessible information to empower themselves to change things for their health. But actually, I think I read a statistic that 92% of information on social media sites such as TikTok, when it comes to nutrition, is in direct contravention to guidelines. And actually, about 60% of people who are the kind of spreaders of this information don't actually have any qualifications in health and nutrition. And I think this is something that it's really difficult to stop mis and disinformation because it's so expansive and these platforms are not always regulated in that kind of very, very nuanced way. I think it's important for healthcare professionals and other people who know the evidence base around nutrition to enter this space and actually have more of a voice in this space. And actually, sometimes it's about, I think it's of health entertainment is the term that I've heard as well. People want to be entertained by the content as well. So it's about having the charisma and leading with that energy as well as presenting the facts. And I think as healthcare professionals, we're not really trained in storytelling. And that's the thing that you just said, storytelling. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, is actually really embodying that story and pulling people in and making sure that we're engaging people and then kind of following it up with those facts and kind of making plant-based nutrition and vegan nutrition, and obviously I think nutrition science is extremely interesting, that's why I got into it as a career, but making it kind of interesting and very engaging to people. And I've seen some healthcare professionals doing that really well in the space with kind of like reaction videos and videos that just are very visually engaging and have snippets of information that pull people in really quickly. So I think actually healthcare professionals have historically been a bit discouraged from using social media, but I think that's kind of being left behind as we move forward in this age of how we process and receive information. And as healthcare professionals, I think we need to enter that space with that energy and kind of bring those facts and almost play the same game as influencers are playing. Leading with energy and following of facts is what I've been thinking about a lot recently. I think that could be really helpful.
Interesting, Emily. Yeah, if you can't beat them, you have to join them, I suppose. What about in Italy, any of our Italian friends, or Slovenia? Anything you'd like to add on the subject of social media?
Okay, in Italy, actually, we have really good community because there is this vegan doctor nutritionist and she is Silvia Goggi, and she's really clear and developed a lot of tools like podcasts and apps and other than social media. So we rely a lot on her because she really is super clear. But I think the problem is that you can be a doctor or an influencer or like working a lot on the social media because it drains a lot of energy. So even asking them to be more present on the social media is a lot to ask. So maybe we should helping our friend influencer, like plant-based and vegan ones, to spread the good messages and the correct messages, like with workshop, and like to have them to spread the good information, to avoid misinformation, I think, but it's complicated.
Yeah, I really totally agree. Valentina, would anyone else? Maja?
Yes, I would just like to add one thing. I agree with everybody with your suggestions. And I was thinking now that we are all adults, we all have this information. So I think it would be good if we would work together with young people. And I'm thinking now elementary school, because they have completely different needs and expectations and what speaks to them. So I think on this level also how to convey information to them, that we work with young people also in the content creation, not that we come from the adult space, but together with them.
Thank you, Maja. Nadia, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah. For example, in Bergamo now, we want to implement the same project, the same pilot to the children, for the young people. And for young people, we use the social campaign, the social activities to change their mind. We will start in the next year, and to change their knowledge about plant-based dishes. Yeah, but only the activities is the most are social media campaign.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm conscious of time, and we started a little bit. We're running out of time basically. So I'm going to just wrap up. Sorry if we didn't get to all of the questions, but perhaps we can respond separately to those. So I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today, for joining us this evening, wherever you have connected from. Thank you so much to our panelists, Valentina, Maja, Emily, Lorena and Nadia. It's been a really insightful and, for me, very inspiring session on all aspects of food education. I hope those who've joined us have found it really interesting. I'd encourage you to reach out to any of us if there's anything you'd like to follow up on. Find us on LinkedIn or wherever you can find us, and we'll be happy to help you. And just to let you know, tomorrow's session, this is the last session of today, but day 3 begins tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central European time. We have Tomato Gate, who really controls the prices. So I would encourage you to sign up for that session if you haven't already. And thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you another time. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.